I was always the forgotten child while my sister played the star. But after I exposed her online, she sent me voice memos crying, "We're family." My younger sister Brielle is 26 years old now. I'm 30. We don't get along, and honestly, I doubt we ever will. She's been the center of attention since the beginning, and I've always been the one left on the sidelines. When we were kids, I didn't notice anything unusual at first. My parents used to be quite supportive of me. My mother used to scream at my soccer games, while my father would brag about my school projects to the neighbors. However, everything changed when Brielle was born. Suddenly, it was as if I no longer existed. I worked hard to stay relevant. I began studying hard, getting straight A's, and joining clubs not because I enjoyed them, but because I hoped, just maybe, I could reclaim some of their attention. But I did not. Regardless of what I did, Brielle was always the star of the show. The craziest part? She did nothing remarkable to deserve it. She had a way of soaking up all the attention, even when it wasn't supposed to be on her. Let me give you an example. My parents gave me a party for my 18th birthday, and for once, I thought, hey, maybe today will actually be about me. About halfway through the celebration, we received a call from the police. Brielle, 14, was found vandalizing some property with her companions. Her pals escaped away, but Brielle was apprehended. My father, as a cop, pulled some strings and let her off with a warning. By the time they got her home, the party atmosphere had vanished. I just sat there cutting my cake alone as my parents lectured Brielle in the kitchen. This wasn't even the worst of it. There was one final straw that changed everything. When I was 21, I had just gotten my first real job and was ecstatic. I came home ready to rejoice with my family, but Brielle had different intentions. She arrived with her high school lover and announced that they were engaged, despite the fact that she was only 17. My celebration quickly became an engagement party. I was very furious. But when I tried to explain how unjust it was, my parents disregarded me. They said I was overreacting and should be pleased for Brielle. That was the day I determined I was finished. I refused to remain silent any longer. I severed ties with my family after that. I realize that sounds excessive, but I couldn't take it anymore. They never took my side or stood up for me. It was always about Brielle. I did not want to be a part of a family that treated me as an afterthought. The point is, Brielle thrived in this situation. She enjoyed being the center of attention and didn't mind who she had to walk on to stay there. Every time I accomplished something, she found a way to outdo me or shift the spotlight to herself. My parents let her get away with it every time. After I walked away, they attempted to contact me several times, sending SMS and leaving voicemails, but I ignored them. It's been 9 years since I last spoke to them. I learned bits and pieces of Brielle through the grapevine, especially from relatives who still communicate with my parents. Apparently, she canceled that engagement a few weeks later. Isn't that shocking? It turned out to be merely another attention-grabbing stunt. Brielle's style is classic. Looking back, I realized how much their favoritism had messed with my mind. It's not that I wanted to be the favorite or anything. I just wanted to feel important, like my accomplishments were worth something. But no matter what I accomplished, Brielle always managed to outshine me, and my parents encouraged it, whether they knew it or not. Brielle is not only selfish, but also manipulative. She understands how to manipulate people and gain their support. My parents were her main enablers. They were always there to clean up after her mistakes. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself. It wasn't easy leaving my family, but it was vital. I needed to put some space between us so I could focus on myself for once. I made a fresh start. I became serious about my profession, saved every money I could, and dedicated my efforts to creating a life I could be proud of. My initial goal was to get out of the flat I had been stuck in since college. It wasn't horrible, but I wanted something that seemed more personal. 2 years ago, I finally accomplished that. I purchased a house, not just any house, but one that exclaimed, "This is what I've worked for." It had everything I desired: space, solitude, and a new beginning. Moving into that residence was like crossing a finish line. I made it. But I wasn't foolish enough to believe I could let my guard down totally. Family has a way of seeping back in, whether we want them to or not. So I informed everyone, including extended relatives and old family friends, that my new address was off limits. I did not want my folks or Brielle to show up uninvited. I was not going to let them spoil this fresh chapter of my life. Meanwhile, Brielle's life wasn't going so well. I did not have direct interaction with her, but people talk. According to what I've heard, her huge business venture a few years ago was a complete disaster. She wanted to start an event organizing firm, which is ludicrous given how chaotic she is. It didn't take long for the whole affair to fall apart, leaving her drowning in debt. Of course, Mom and Dad were there to help her out, as always. Brielle's failures did not end there. I'd heard rumors about her borrowing money from pals and possibly being involved in some dubious business. Nothing solid, but enough to create an image of someone desperate and reckless. Recently I was featured on the cover of a local business magazine. It appears to have sparked many conversations among our family. Brielle most likely heard about it as well, and I can only imagine how much it stung. She's always wanted to be the center of attention, and seeing me triumph must have hit her ego hard. Then followed the graffiti incident. 6 days ago, I was leaving for the evening when I noticed it. My house, my sanctuary, the one thing I had fought so hard to make mine, was splattered with angry, ugly remarks in brilliant red paint. It was everywhere. The front walls, the garage door, the windows, and even my meticulously painted front door. Words like fraud and loser were scribbled across my property in sloppy, jagged strokes. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a personal attack on everything I'd accomplished for myself. I stood there stunned, my keys dangling in my palm, trying to figure out what I was witnessing. My initial thought was, why? What have I done to deserve this? I felt a mix of rage, perplexity, and sadness, all rolled into one powerful storm. I became more aware of finer features as I approached. The paint was still wet and dripped down the walls in uneven stripes. Whoever did this had recently been here. My thoughts raced. Was it purely random? A neighbor with a grudge? But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A faint trail of muddy footsteps running away from the site and onto the pavement. They were little, like women's shoes. Suddenly the pieces came together. I stormed inside and headed straight for the security cameras. I placed them for peace of mind, never expecting to use them for something like this. My hands shook as I rewinded the footage, desperate to find out who had done this. And there she was. Brielle. She tried to hide herself with a hoodie, but I could see her anywhere. The way she moved and the small peek she cast over her shoulder were apparent. The cameras captured just enough of her face to leave no doubt. But that was not all. As I peered at the screen, I saw something unusual about her handwriting. The jagged, sloppy letters on the walls looked precisely like the notes she used to leave around the house when we were youngsters. Whenever we had a fight, she would write me nasty messages and sneak them under my door. It was like her calling card. The revelation struck me like a ton of bricks. Brielle didn't just want to hurt me. She also wanted to make sure I recognized her. At first, I wasn't sure what to do. My instinctive reaction was to call the police. Vandalism is a crime, and she should face the repercussions. But then I realized who I was dealing with. Dad may be retired now, but he still had many acquaintances in the police force. Brielle has been using her connections to avoid consequences for years. I knew exactly how it was going to play out. I'd submit a report, Dad would make a few calls, and Brielle would walk away without even a slap on the wrist. The thought of her smirking and knowing she'd gotten away with it again made my wrath boil. That was not good enough for me. I chose to handle things my way. I grabbed my phone and began photographing everything. I photographed every nasty word, paint streak, and inch of damage. I also made a video of myself standing in front of the graffiti and describing what had transpired. Then I accessed the surveillance footage and captured screenshots of Brielle in action. My heart raced as I put everything together, but I didn't hesitate. I'd had enough of being silent. That night I uploaded everything online. I didn't explicitly mention Brielle, but I didn't need to. Anyone who knew us, including family members, old friends, and distant relatives, could easily connect the connections. The caption was straightforward. This is what happens when someone can't handle your success. Proof is included. The response was quick. The post became viral within hours, garnering likes, shares, and comments faster than I could keep up. People were upset on my behalf. Strangers I'd never met chastised Brielle for her behavior, while friends flooded my email with letters of encouragement. Even longtime relatives began to speak up, expressing shock and disgust at Brielle's actions. For the first time in years, I believed I had the upper hand. Brielle was not about to walk away from this without facing serious consequences. And if my parents decided to defend her, that was their decision, but they would have to deal with the consequences. I spent the remainder of the night repainting the front door and removing the paint wherever I could. It wasn't simply about repairing the damage, it was about recovering my place. By the end, I was exhausted yet oddly satisfied. The graffiti was removed, but the post remained. This wasn't only about exposing Brielle. It was about sticking up for oneself. For too long I had been silenced, disregarded, and rejected. Not anymore. By the end of the week I had repainted the house and cleaned up Brielle's mess. It didn't cost me much, so I didn't bother claiming insurance. Somehow I felt satisfied. The post remained up. It wasn't just about exposing Brielle. It was about recovering my own voice. For too long, I had been silenced, disregarded, and rejected. Not anymore. That was my mantra as I saw my post spread like wildfire. People I hadn't spoken to in years left comments, messages, and shared it. The response was astounding. Some strangers were upset on my behalf, questioning how someone could be so entitled and cruel. Others contributed their own stories of family dysfunction and betrayal, claiming they could relate to my predicament. For once I didn't feel like an insane person. Naturally, not everyone agreed with me. A few others tried to play devil's advocate, arguing that I should have addressed the situation quietly. But truthfully, I had been keeping silent for years. I was done shielding Brielle from the consequences of her conduct. She vandalized my house, and I had every right to confront her. Brielle was obviously not happy with it. Her communications were all about phony apologies and desperation. She kept pleading, "Come on, we're family," as if this somehow wiped everything she'd done. She volunteered to pay for the damages, which was ludicrous given her financial situation. We were both aware that her only source of income was our parents' money. I turned down the financial offer and insisted that she admit her acts and publicly apologize for the damage. I told her that I would only consider deleting the post after she did so. She flipped. She stated it wasn't fair to expect her to disgrace herself in that way. Humiliate? No. It was accountability, which she had never experienced before. Brielle has a habit of twisting things to make herself look like the victim. She claimed the post was wrecking her life, but the truth was that she had been ruining her own life long before I pushed upload. My folks jumped in as expected. My father called first, his voice tense with rage. He didn't even ask how I was or why I put it. He went directly to defend Brielle. "You need to take that post down. Do you realize what you've done to your sister's reputation?" he demanded, as if Brielle's reputation were my responsibility. I told him Brielle should have considered that before spray painting my house. Dad was not having it. He began using language like family unity and we need to stick together. I could almost hear Mom coaching him in the background. They acted as if I was pulling the family apart, despite the reality that Brielle had done so for years. I remained calm and reminded Dad that if Brielle wanted the message taken down, she knew what to do. I didn't budge. Later in the day, Mom called. She attempted a new approach, hitting me with a guilt trip. She began crying and saying, "I never thought you'd do something like this. You're better than this." Better than what? Stand up for myself? She confessed that Brielle and I were treated differently growing up, but then remarked, "We've tried so hard to fix things with you, and this is how you repay us." I couldn't believe what I heard. Fix things? They had ignored me for years, justified Brielle's actions, and were now playing the victim. I told her that if she wanted to repair things, she should start by holding Brielle accountable. She kept sobbing, claiming I was being unjust. I allowed her to cry it out, but I did not change my mind. The comments on the post kept coming in, and finally some of Brielle's old pals joined in. They said stuff I didn't know about girls, such fights she provoked, scams she ran, and other questionable conduct. The more people talked, it became evident that I hadn't harmed Brielle's reputation. She had done it all on her own. Brielle was in a state of desperation. She sent me another message, this time angrier than the last. She accused me of being a wannabe martyr, exaggerating things, and even calling me jealous. What exactly are you jealous of? What's her debt? What's her drama? My father started into a sermon about family and forgiveness, while Mom did her best to appear angry. A lawyer they brought handed me some documents, claiming that the post was defamatory and needed to be taken down. I skimmed the paperwork, returned them and said, "If you want to sue me, go ahead. But good luck explaining why Brielle was caught on camera vandalizing my property." My uncle attempted to mediate. "Look, I know Brielle messed up, but this is getting out of hand. Let's sit down and work this out," he was saying. I agreed, but when Brielle stepped in, she began ranting about how I had ruined her life. "You don't even know what you've done," she exclaimed, pacing the room. I remained silent and inattentive, letting her rant, which seemed to irritate my father. He raged, throwing his fists at my coffee table so hard that the wood splintered and collapsed. The room fell silent as everyone glanced at the devastation. Dad looked at me and shouted, "Are you just going to sit there and do nothing?" This is your family, and you're tearing it apart. I did not respond. I simply stared at him. That seemed to aggravate him, but my uncle intervened to draw him back. No one spoke for a time, and the air was thick with anxiety. Finally, Mom spoke. "Please take it down. Do it for the family," she said to me. "No," I responded. "Brielle made her choices, and now she's dealing with the consequences. I'm not fixing this for her." Dad stormed off without saying another word. Brielle slammed the door. Mom hesitated, looked at me, and then departed. I grumbled and returned to my seat after taking a look at the broken coffee table. It was clearer than ever that they would not change, and I was not going to help them. After they had departed, I sat down and read over the comments on my post. Support was still flooding in. People were sharing their personal tales and applauding me for standing up to someone harmful. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone. The following few days were tense. Brielle started sending me texts, ranging from phony apologies to direct threats. "You're ruining my life," one person wrote. Another stated, "If you don't take it down, I'll make sure you regret it." Classic Brielle was always trying to bully her way into achieving what she wanted. I did not respond. Engaging with her was like putting fuel on a fire. The situation then escalated. My uncle called again, attempting to act as a mediator. "Listen," he began, his tone far too calm for my liking. "Brielle is struggling right now. You have no idea what this post is doing to her." "Struggling?" I asked. "She vandalized my house, and you're worried about her feelings? Maybe she should have thought about that before grabbing a spray can." My uncle sighed, obviously frustrated. "It's not just about her, you know. Your dad's reputation is on the line too. People are starting to talk." That caught my interest. I hadn't considered the consequences for my father. He had spent years covering for Brielle, and now it was catching up with him. But instead of feeling bad, I felt validated. For once, their immaculate little facade began to fracture. Brielle showed up at my house the next day, beating on the door so hard that it woke the neighbors. I opened it, and before she could shove her way inside, I stepped in front of her, blocking her passage. "What do you want, Brielle?" I questioned, maintaining a stern tone. "We need to talk," she stated, attempting to avoid me. "You're not coming in. Say whatever you have to say right here," I said, staying firm. She appeared annoyed, but did not argue. "Fine. That post, you need to take it down. Now." I crossed my arms. "Not happening." Her frustration was all over her face. She looked behind me, as if assessing her options for barging past. "You've ruined everything in my life, my reputation. Do you even care? Did you care about my house when you vandalized it? Did you care about my life or reputation then?" I questioned, maintaining her gaze. She threw her hands into the air. "This isn't fair, you don't know what I've been through." I took a step forward and closed the distance. "You're right, I don't. But that's not my problem, Brielle. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences." Her gaze darted to the side, searching for something to latch onto. I watched her peek at a flower pot on my porch, her fingers quivering as if she was about to grasp it. Before she could, I moved in front of it. "Don't even think about it." She exhaled sharply and stepped back, visibly frustrated. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Sitting here in your perfect little house, acting like your life is so great." "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Brielle," I corrected her. "But I'm not the one who showed up at your house and started causing problems. You don't get to make a mess and then blame me for the cleanup." Her lips opened and closed, as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the right words. Finally, she turned towards the driveway. "You'll regret this," she yelled over her shoulder, slamming the gate behind her. I remained there for a time, watching her rush away. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt exhausted. Brielle had spent years attempting to drag me into her insanity, but this time I wasn't going to allow her. If she wanted to change her life, it was her responsibility. My job was to safeguard myself. Later that night, I received a call from my uncle. He sounded panicked. "Brielle's talking about legal action," he told me. "She thinks if she sues you, you'll cave." "Let her try," I said. "She's got no case." "That's what I told her, but she's not listening," my uncle explained. "She's out of control, and your parents aren't helping. They're still trying to protect her." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. That's their problem, not mine. I'm done cleaning up their messes. The fight wasn't simply between Brielle and me. It was me versus the entire family dynamic. For years I had been the scapegoat, expected to meekly accept being neglected and mistreated. But now I had a voice, and I was not going to let it go. The following few days were unusually quiet. Brielle stopped texting me, and my parents did not show up again. I assumed they were regrouping and coming up with a fresh plan. But I didn't care. Then, unforeseen controversies emerged. My suspicions were verified a few days later, as my uncle called. My piece had gotten even more traction, and the comments were nonstop. People were spreading it, analyzing the security footage, and even digging out more information on Brielle. It was as if the internet had chosen to be my personal detective. I was even shocked by some of the stories that came to light. Brielle appears to have engaged in more than just vandalism. People were coming out with stories about unpaid bills, dodgy business agreements, and even charges of drug dealing. Someone uploaded a screenshot of a group chat in which Brielle boasted about getting away with stuff thanks to her father's connections. The screenshot went viral. Suddenly, the tale was no longer about me, but about a crooked system that protected people like Brielle. My parents were deeply affected by the repercussions. Dad's reputation as a respected cop, earned over decades, was deteriorating. His name was mentioned in every comment thread, and others accused him of covering up Brielle's mistakes for years. Honestly, they weren't wrong. Dad had always enabled Brielle, bending the rules to keep her safe from consequences. Everything was now catching up to him. Mom wasn't handling it well either. She had always been the emotional one, but this was different. I learned from a relative that she had started seeing a therapist, which was long overdue. Brielle, predictably, was in full meltdown mode. The last I heard, she was staying with a friend and trying to keep quiet. She erased all of her social media accounts, most likely to avoid the flood of tweets calling her out. Unfortunately, it was too late. The harm had been done, and everyone was aware of her true character. Then the legal ramifications began to pile up. Someone had anonymously reported Brielle's vandalism to the police, and since the footage was already public, Dad couldn't do anything to help. Brielle was arrested and charged not just with vandalism to my residence, but also with multiple other acts that had come to light through the post. What about the cherry on top? The allegations of drug peddling were significant enough to justify an investigation. Brielle's irresponsible behavior was finally catching up with her, and there was no getting around it this time. For me, the repercussions seemed strangely validating. I'd spent years being told I was overreacting, that I was overly sensitive, and that I needed to let things go. But now that the truth was out, everybody could see what I had been going through. Relatives who had remained neutral or supported my parents began reaching out to apologize. Even strangers on the internet were rooting for me, offering notes of encouragement. But a few days later, I received a call from Aunt Diane. Her tone was strong and almost accusatory. "Your post is causing drama," she commented, as if I hadn't noticed. "Your parents are beside themselves, and Brielle's devastated. Maybe you should think about taking it down for the sake of family peace." Before responding, I paused for a second to allow her words to sink in. "Have you ever seen the footage, Aunt Diane?" I inquired, my voice cool. There was a pause. "I don't need to," she replied defensively. "This is a private matter. Airing dirty laundry online only makes things worse for everyone." I couldn't believe what I heard. Despite the proof, some people still wanted to defend Brielle. It was not about right or wrong for them. It was about maintaining the family's image. "Well, maybe if Brielle had thought about that before vandalizing my house, we wouldn't be having this conversation," I said. Diane sighed, obviously frustrated. "You're not helping, you know. Your parents are under so much stress, and this isn't going to fix anything." "And coddling Brielle will?" I inquired, my patience dwindling. "I'm not taking the post down, Diane. If you're more worried about appearances than what Brielle actually did, that's on you, but don't expect me to play along." She murmured something under her breath before hanging up, leaving me shaking my head. It astounded me that even after viewing the evidence, some individuals still thought I was the problem. Regardless of how people perceived it, the true issue was that my parents still couldn't understand the broader picture. They kept blaming me for everything, claiming that if I had simply removed the post, none of this would have occurred. It was frustrating. Brielle had made her own bed, but I was the villain for not cleaning up her mess. Because they chose their side, they had to face the consequences. My uncle sent me an SMS the other night. "Your father lost his job today." I glanced at the screen, not sure how to feel. Dad's role in covering up Brielle's antics had finally caught up with him, and the department had no choice but to release him. Part of me felt bad for him. He had worked hard for that career. But another part of him realized that this was the only way he was going to learn. He had spent years enabling Brielle, and now he was paying the consequences. Mom tried contacting me the same night, but I didn't answer. I wasn't prepared to deal with her cries and guilt trips. Instead, I sat on my couch and read through the most recent comments on the post. People were still sharing their own tales about dealing with toxic family members, which made me feel less alone. For so long, I felt like the odd one out, as if I were the problem. But I just realized I wasn't. I was the only one brave enough to confront Brielle and my parents. The following day I received another communication, this time from one of Brielle's former acquaintances. They praised me for exposing Brielle, claiming they had been taken advantage of by her for years. "It's about time someone called her out," the message stated. That struck me hard. Brielle hadn't simply damaged me, she'd hurt so many others, and my post gave them the guts to speak up. Brielle's case eventually ended up in court. She pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. With the security footage, group chat screenshots and testimonies from others she had offended, there was no way she was getting out of this. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison, with no possibility of parole. The sentencing was harsh, but she earned it. My parents had gone quiet following the sentencing. I believe they were ashamed, perhaps even angry, but there was no more concealing the fact. Their golden child had become a disaster of their own making. Dad's profession had ended, Mom's emotional state was shaky at best, and their once perfect family image had been smashed. It wasn't the outcome I had hoped for when I first shared the video, but I wasn't surprised. Enabling someone like Brielle always has consequences. Meanwhile, I immersed myself in my work. My business was growing, and I was not going to let family problems ruin it. But, as much as I wanted to leave everything behind, there were reminders that I couldn't ignore. Relatives who had been silent throughout the height of the drama began coming out to offer support and share their own grievances about Brielle and my parents. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner, while others simply wanted to scream. It was validating, but also taxing. Everyone appeared to have a story about how Brielle had mistreated them, or how my parents had allowed it to happen. I received a letter in the mail from Mom. It was long and handwritten, full of regrets for how things had turned out, how Mother and Dad had treated me, and for failing to intervene when Brielle's behavior became out of control. Even as I read her words, I couldn't shake the sense that something was missing. She refused to accept responsibility for enabling Brielle. She did not appreciate the years of neglect I had suffered. It felt like a surface-level apology, intended to alleviate her shame rather than actually make apologies. Brielle, on the other hand, had maintained perfect silence. I had not heard from her since her sentencing, and I did not expect to. Whatever relationship we might have had was long over, and I was fine with that. Brielle had made her decisions and was now dealing with the consequences. I owed her nothing, not my forgiveness, not my understanding, and especially not my time. As the months evolved into years, I focused on creating a life that felt authentic to me. I traveled more, met new people, and even began dating again. It was difficult to let down my guard after everything I had been through, but I was determined not to let my family's dysfunction define me. I deserved better, and for the first time in my life, I gave it to myself. Looking back, it's difficult to comprehend how much has changed. The person I was before all of this, the one who remained silent and let Brielle and my parents walk all over her, seems like a stranger. I'm not that person anymore, and I'm proud of the progress I've made. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt like the weight of it all would crush me. But I persevered and emerged stronger. And I don't think moving on implies forgetting. It entails learning from the past, applying those lessons to create a better tomorrow. That is what I am doing now. Brielle, my parents, and the devastation they caused in my life are only chapters in my story. Important ones, yes, but not the entire book. What is the best part? I am finally in control of my own story. My sister faked illness for years to ruin my life. So I exposed her at family dinner and watched her beg as everyone walked away. Let me go back to the beginning. My younger sister Morgan was born 2 months prematurely, bluer than a robin's egg, and spent the first 3 years of her life hooked up to tubes and machines at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Naturally, my parents were very protective of her. They'd camp out by her bedside, buy every toy she pointed to, and demand that I stop going out with friends to watch her. At first, I assumed this was correct. She was my chronically ill baby sister after all. But then Morgan got older and healthier. She no longer needed oxygen tanks or feeding tubes and could live entirely normally, However, by this point, she had discovered that being unwell got her anything she desired, whether it was material possessions or simply pity and attention. Her headaches began to inexplicably return whenever she had algebra homework. Mom and Dad would whisk the textbooks away, replacing them with Ben and Jerry's Chunky Monkey and Netflix access. By the time Morgan was 11 and I was 16, she had mastered her act. And it bothered me since her pain only struck during my best times. When I made varsity soccer at Lincoln High, she got inexplicable stomach cramps, forcing my parents to leave my first game early. When I was accepted to Penn State, she fell during my celebratory supper at Olive Garden, and we spent the night in the emergency room at Jefferson Hospital, where physicians discovered nothing wrong. The worst part was that she would smirk at me when our parents weren't watching. She even tried making painful looks in the bathroom mirror. I tried to show my parents once, but Morgan had already told them I was resentful of the attention she required for her condition. My lover, Ethan, lasted 8 months until Morgan got to him. She fabricated bogus screenshots of text chats in which I allegedly branded her a faker and wished she would simply leave. The split took place at Starbucks on Market Street. Ethan pushed his iPhone across the table to show me the proof Morgan had assembled. He refused to be with someone who mistreated their sick sister. Morgan texted me a selfie wearing the Eagles sweater Ethan gave me for Christmas. That was my breaking point. For 5 years, I'd watched her steal everything that was important to me. So I began to watch her intently, far more closely than anyone else had. I saw a pattern. Every time Morgan was in agony, she grasped her right side, whether it was her head, stomach, or kidneys. She always called for Mom first, never Dad. Her pain was consistently scored between 8 and 10 on the medical scale, and she usually recovered in exactly 2 to 3 hours, which was just enough time to undo everything I had planned. Once I recognized this trend, I devised my strategy. And this Sunday, at our monthly family dinner, it went down better than I could have imagined. We were having our usual meeting with all of the aunts, uncles and cousins at Grandma Helen's house in Germantown, with around 20 people jammed around her large oak dining table, which had been in our family for decades. 20 minutes before supper, I excused myself to the upstairs bathroom and filmed a video on my phone. In that video, I indicated that I was ready to make a phony statement about being promoted at my marketing agency downtown. I foresaw Morgan's reaction. She would wait for the ovation to go down before grabbing her right side and whimpering for Mom. She rated her agony as an 8, 9 or 10. She would need to lie down right away and ask her mother to drive her to the hospital if the agony did not subside within 20 minutes. During dinner, I stood up and clinked my wineglass with a butter knife, drawing everyone's attention. The talk ceased as 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Then I revealed that I had been promoted to senior account manager with a significant raise at Henderson & Associates. Everyone exploded into applause and congrats. Uncle Brian caressed my back, my cousins Brittany and Ashley held me tightly, and Mom had tears of pride in her eyes. The sound of clapping boomed through Grandma's dining room, along with congratulations and jokes about how I could finally afford to leave my studio apartment. Uncle Brian joked about me becoming the family's wealthy niece, while Grandma was already discussing how I could assist her with her prescription expenditures. I kept a grin on my face, greeting and thanking everyone, but my eyes were fixed on Morgan. She was sitting at the far end of the long table, between my cousin Jake and Aunt Melissa, mindlessly moving around the mashed potatoes on her plate. For a brief period, she appeared to be truly thrilled for me. Almost. But I knew her too well. I noticed the exact moment something changed in her expression. It was modest, as it often is, a small constriction around her eyes and a slight stiffness of her shoulders. She looked around the table, observing how everyone was looking at me, how they were truly happy about my accomplishment, and how I was shining. Then it began. First, Morgan stopped eating. She dropped her fork onto her dish with a gentle clink, which only a few people closely noticed. Aunt Melissa inquired as to her well-being, but Morgan simply shook her head with the forced smile she employed to appear courageous in the face of unbearable suffering. I kept talking with Uncle Brian about the intricacies of my promotion, brazenly lying about responsibilities I didn't have and a salary that didn't exist. But part of me was counting down like a Swiss watch. 3, 2, 1. She moved her hand to the right side of her abdomen. The initial moan was hardly inaudible, a quiet sigh that blended into the background sounds of discussions. But Morgan understood exactly how to project her voice, giving the impression that she was attempting to hide something when, in fact, she wanted everyone to hear. My cousin Jake, who was sitting next to her, paused midway through his narrative about his new job at the fire department. "Morgan, is everything okay there?" he inquired, leaning toward her with worry. "It's nothing," she said softly, but loud enough for at least half the table to hear. Her voice had that distinct, courageous tone mixed with a trace of vulnerability that always warmed people's hearts. "Just a little pain," she said quietly. And so began the show I'd seen so many times before. Aunt Melissa immediately turned to face Morgan, forgetting her talk with Grandpa Joe about the Eagles' chances this season. "What kind of pain, sweetie? Where does it hurt?" Morgan curved slightly in her chair, a flawless performance measured to the millimeter. Not overly dramatic, as that would appear artificial. Just enough to indicate real discomfort. It's here, on the right side," she explained, pressing her fingers against her body. "It came out of nowhere." I witnessed the shift in real time. Conversations gradually became quieter. Glances eventually shifted toward Morgan. My promotion, which had been the center of attention minutes before, faded into the background, replaced by the constant familial concern that enveloped my sister. Mom, who had been laughing with me at Uncle Mike's account about his awful fishing trip, abruptly stopped laughing. That emotion I recognized so well began to spread over her face, the maternal terror Morgan knew how to instill with surgical precision. "Morgan, what happened, honey?" Mom was already partly up from her chair, and her napkin had fallen on the hardwood floor. Morgan always looked at Mom first, never at Dad. I'd seen this trend years ago. "Mom, it's hurting quite a bit," she said quietly, her voice shaking just enough. Not too much, not too little, just enough to sound authentic, but not so much that it appeared theatrical. Dad, like always, shifted into problem-solving mode. "What kind of pain? Cramping? Burning? Sharp?" "It's a dull ache," Morgan said, closing her eyes as if trying to convey it correctly. "But really intense, and it's getting worse." Grandma Helen crossed herself. Uncle Brian scowled, worried. My cousin Ashley had already asked if anyone had Advil in their purse. The entire room's attention had turned from me to Morgan, as if water was whirling down the drain. I remained smiling, joining in the supposition about what was causing Morgan's anguish. But inside, I was captivated by how the machine worked. It was like witnessing a conductor direct an orchestra. Each sigh, display of anguish and statement is tailored to elicit the exact appropriate reaction. "On a scale of 1 to 10, Dad inquired, already taking the Honda keys from the sideboard near the table. Over the years, our family has developed a hallowed ritual around this topic. Morgan hesitated for a moment, as if assessing the severity of the agony, another excellent touch. If she responded instantly, it might appear rehearsed. It's an 8, she finally answered, her voice becoming softer. Maybe a 9. Of course it was. It was never less than 8. Never give a 10 if it's too dramatic or evident. Always between 8 and 9. Enough to cause concern, but not enough to raise suspicions. I saw the entire family dynamic shift around Morgan's sorrow. Aunt Melissa began informing everyone about her kidney stones. Grandma whispered about how the poor girl had been through so much since she was young. My cousin Jake had already suggested that it might be appendicitis. In less than 5 minutes, my promotion had faded into the past. Morgan curled slightly more, using her second hand to support the first. "Mom, I think I need to lie down," she said softly but clearly enough for everyone to hear. And then she did something that made me want to shout. She grinned after gazing directly at me for a second, when she was certain no one else was looking. A little smile, almost unnoticeable. But it was there. The smile of someone who has just scored the winning goal. "Maybe we should take her to Temple Hospital," Mom suggested, already rising up entirely. "Melissa, can you drive? I'm too nervous." At that point, something inside me snapped. It wasn't fury anymore. It was something colder, more calculated. Everyone jumped up, ready to turn what should have been a night of celebration into another dash to the ER. I stood up too. But instead of taking my handbag, I grabbed my phone. "Wait," I murmured, my voice seeming calmer than I felt. "Before we go running to the hospital, there's something you all need to see." Morgan stared at me, and for the first time, I noticed something odd in her expression. A trace of mistrust. Perhaps even fear. However, she was too committed to the act to stop now. "Riley, this isn't the time for this," she replied, her voice still weak and pained. "I'm in a lot of pain." "I understand how much pain you're in," I responded, unlocking my phone. "And I know exactly when it's going to pass." Aunt Melissa scowled. "Riley, what do you mean by that?" I held the phone up, my finger lingering above the play button. I recorded a video 20 minutes ago. You're all going to want to watch this. Morgan became utterly still. Her hand was still pressed against her right side. Her expression was still painful. But something had changed. It was as if she felt the ground was shifting beneath her feet but didn't know why. "What video?" Mom said, still split between concern for Morgan and interest in what I was doing. I gazed directly at Morgan, capturing the exact instant she realized something was seriously wrong. Her eyes expanded slightly, but she couldn't give up the act now, especially in front of the whole family. "A video that's going to explain a lot," I remarked, pressing play. My voice came out clear and firm over the phone speaker. "It's 6:40 p.m. on Sunday. In 20 minutes, I'm going to make a false announcement about a promotion at work during family dinner. When I do this, Morgan will wait for the applause to finish, then she'll grab the right side of her body and call for Mom. She'll rate the pain as 8 or 9. She'll ask to lie down, and if she follows her pattern, she'll suggest going to the hospital in exactly 15 minutes. The room was so silent that I could hear the tick-tock of Grandma's grandfather clock. All eyes were drawn to Morgan, who had been utterly frozen, her hand remaining firmly attached to her right side as if it had been superglued there. "She always holds the right side," my recorded voice said brutally. "No matter what type of pain it is, the head, stomach and kidney are always on the right side. Always calls specifically for Mom first. And she always recovers in 2 to 3 hours. Just enough time to ruin any important moment of mine." Grandma Helen was the first to discover her voice. "Morgan, is this true?" Morgan attempted to recover, but I could see panic developing in her eyes. "I don't know what Riley is talking about," she muttered, attempting to revert to her sorrowful tone. "I'm really in pain. Don't you believe me?" "I'm not done yet," I said, pausing the first video. "That was just the appetizer." I moved on to the next folder on my phone, which I had methodically compiled over the previous few months. "Do you want to see what really happened at my high school graduation?" "Riley, stop this," Morgan said quietly, but her voice had lost its dramatic softness. Now it sounded harsh, almost frightening. I started the next video. I'd obtained security camera footage from Lincoln High through my friend Kevin, who worked in the IT department. The grainy image shows Morgan in the side hallway near the water fountains, 5 minutes before the wedding started. She was totally alone, checking her phone. Then she abruptly put the phone aside, looked around to ensure no one was looking, and began practicing. My sister was rehearsing painful expressions alone in the corridor. She scowled, lifted her palm to her chest, and made various grimaces at the reflection in the glass trophy case. She was literally practicing whatever expression would be the most convincing. "My God," Aunt Melissa said quietly, her hand flying to cover her lips. "Wait, there's more," I remarked, proceeding to the next file. "Remember when Ethan broke up with me? When he said I was cruel to my sick sister?" Morgan turned pale. "Riley, don't." These are the original messages she sent to Ethan pretending to be me. I showed her the screenshots I had recovered from her phone's cloud backup, which was another favor from my tech-savvy pal Kevin. "Look at the dates and times. She waited for me to leave the house to use my laptop and create fake social media accounts. The messages were vicious, saying horrible things about Morgan that I would never think, let alone write. But they were written in my style, with slang I used, details that only someone who knew me intimately would include." Dad seized my phone with shaky hands and read each message. His expression became darker with each line. "She even researched your work schedule," I claimed, "to know when I wouldn't be home. She created a fake Instagram profile with my photo, added Ethan as a friend, and started sending these messages pretending to be me. When he confronted me about them, she acted shocked and said, 'I must have let someone use my computer.' Mom whispered, 'Morgan, this can't be true.' 'But it is,' I responded, feeling a terrible delight as Morgan's house of cards started to disintegrate. And there's more. Much more." I proceeded to the next file, an audio recording I had secretly made the previous month with a voice recorder app. "This is Morgan on the phone with her friend Tara last week." Morgan's voice came through clearly on the phone. "It's really easy, Tara. You just need to know the right buttons to push. Mom gets desperate if I say it's a headache on the right side. But if I say it's stomach pain, she takes longer to react. And it always works better when Riley is having a good day, then everyone feels sorry for me and gets annoyed with her for being insensitive." Tara laughed during the recording. "You're terrible, Morgan. But your sister really is kind of stuck up anyway. She thinks she's better than everyone." Morgan continued. She was always the favorite. Always had everything handed to her. At least when I fake being sick, I managed to get them to pay attention to me too. And it's fun watching her get frustrated. The hush that ensued was deadly. Morgan was as white as a sheet, trembling, and this time it was real. Grandma Helen's disappointed voice pierced through the air. "Morgan, how could you?" "There's more," I stated repeatedly. "Do you want to see the video of when she fainted at my 18th birthday party?" Morgan attempted to stand up, most likely to flee, but Uncle Brian softly but firmly grabbed her shoulders. "Stay there, Morgan. I think you need to hear this." The footage showed Morgan in our backyard, hidden behind the BBQ grill, 10 minutes before her grand debut. She was experimenting with several ways to faint on the grass, determining which angle would be the most convincing and least risky. For 15 minutes, she practiced falling sideways, forward and backward. She chose the side fall since the grass was gentler. My cousin Jake let out a sound that was half surprised laughter and half grunt of astonishment. "Morgan, this is sick." "It's not sick," I finally responded, putting down the phone. "It's calculated, systematic." She turned manipulation into an art form. Morgan eventually exploded. Okay, damn it. Do you want the truth? I faked it. I faked it sometimes, yes. But you don't understand." The tears began to flow again, but this time they were different. Tears of rage, frustration, and of someone caught red-handed. "Do you think it's easy being Riley's sister? Riley the smart one, Riley the popular one? Riley who never does anything wrong. Do you know what it's like to grow up in her shadow?" "So you decided to sabotage me," I stated bitterly. "Destroy my relationships, ruin my important moments, make everyone think I'm a cruel and insensitive sister." "Because you had everything," Morgan yelled, abandoning her act of being sick. "You always had everything. And me? I was just the sister who almost died as a baby. The only way anyone paid attention to me was when I was sick." "But you weren't sick," Dad remarked, his voice low but filled with genuine sadness. "You were lying for years and sabotaging your sister's life in the process. And stealing money," Mom finished, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Morgan, how could you be so cruel?" "Cruel?" Morgan chuckled bitterly. "Do you want to know what's cruel? Growing up watching your sister get congratulated for breathing, while you need to almost die for someone to notice you." "You were never almost dying," I yelled. "At least not in the last 5 years. You were acting, manipulating, lying because it worked, because it was the only thing that worked." "Because it was the only thing that worked," she exclaimed back. The room was stunned into silence. One by one, family members stood up and distanced themselves from Morgan. Uncle Brian shook his head with contempt. Aunt Melissa grabbed her handbag with shaky hands. Even Grandma Helen, Morgan's staunchest supporter, sat transfixed in her chair, staring at her youngest grandchild as if she were a stranger. 15 years, Mom whispered. 15 years of believing, worrying, canceling plans, losing sleep. "And I lost 15 years of my life too," I remarked. 15 years being treated as the cruel and insensitive sister. 15 years watching my important moments get destroyed. 15 years being blamed for not having enough patience with the sick sister. Morgan raised her face, tears streaking through her makeup. "Riley, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." "Now you're sorry?" I inquired. "Now that you've been caught?" I looked around the table at my family and saw a mixture of shock, sadness and betrayal on their faces. "You all know now. You all know what kind of person she really is. You know what she did to me, to this family for years." I grabbed my handbag and approached the door. Morgan's genuine, not fake, tears followed me. "Where are you going?" Mom inquired, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Away from here," I said. "Away from this toxic dynamic, and especially away from her." I pointed at Morgan without looking in her direction. "I'm going where I should have gone years ago. I'm going to build a life where people like her can't reach me." The door crashed behind me, but not before Morgan began screaming. This time the pain was genuine, not fabricated. The misery of finally having to confront who she truly was. And for the first time in years, hearing her sorrow did not make me feel guilty. It made me feel liberated. Sometimes the truth hurts more than any lie could. However, sometimes the agony is exactly what is required to finally recover. I cut off my freeloading sister, but she stole my identity. My parents enabled her, yet I walked away, choosing self-respect over their toxicity. Do you know how some individuals joke about becoming the family bank? For me, it wasn't a joke. It was my life. For 5 years, I'd been my sister Melissa's unofficial treasurer, paying her rent, electricity, groceries, and even the occasional splurge for her daughter Ellie. All while working a blue-collar job where overtime wasn't a bonus but a necessity. Melissa was not always like this. She once had a husband and a sense of stability. But when her rage became too much for him to manage, he walked out, leaving her with a stack of bills and a kid. That was when the family baton of responsibility was passed to me. Our parents, reveling in their retired golden years, made it obvious that they had no intention of intervening. "You're young and capable, John," Mom said to me when I brought it up. "You can handle it." So, I handled it. I tightened my belt, worked additional shifts, and put my own aspirations on hold. All to ensure Melissa and Ellie did not go without. I told myself it was the correct thing to do. Who else was going to help them? But then, a year ago, Melissa landed a nice job. Nothing flashy, but it included a paycheck, benefits, and the opportunity to finally get back on her feet. I decided I'd help out for a little longer until she adjusted. But as the months passed, I observed something troubling. Melissa wasn't battling anymore. At family dinners, she'd nonchalantly mention her most recent shopping trip or the new gizmo she'd purchased for Ellie. At first, I stayed quiet, thinking to myself that she deserved to have some fun after going through so much. But last week, she pushed me too hard. We were at Mom and Dad's house for dinner. Melissa, Ellie, our parents, and Uncle Rob. The supper was the usual commotion, with Ellie refusing to eat her veggies while Mom and Dad spoke about their most recent cruise. Then Melissa dropped a bomb. "I'm thinking about buying this amazing purse," she added, displaying a snap from her phone. "It's only $500, but it's designer." I paused mid-bite to comprehend her remarks. "You're thinking about spending $500 on a purse while I'm still paying your rent?" I inquired, my tone calm but forceful. How did she respond? She laughed. "Oh, don't be so cheap, John." Something inside of me cracked. 5 years of sacrifice, forgoing vacations, nights out, and things I desired, all for her. So I was cheap? I set down my fork, my appetite gone. "Cheap?" I repeated, my tone chilly. "Let's talk about cheap, Melissa. Like how I've been covering your rent while you buy purses. Or how I've sacrificed everything while you pretend you're struggling. You know what? I'm done." The room became silent. Mom and Dad were now fascinated by their mashed potatoes, while Melissa looked at me in bewilderment. "What do you mean, done?" she inquired, her tone skeptical. "I mean no more rent, groceries, or handouts," I added, rising up. "You're on your own." Uncle Rob sat back in his chair and blew a low whistle. "Way to go, John," he said, clapping my back. "You don't owe anyone anything." Melissa spluttered, attempting to formulate an answer, but I didn't wait. I grabbed my jacket and went for the door, pausing only to say, "And if you think this is temporary anger, you're wrong. It's time for you to grow up, Melissa." I departed with my heart racing in my chest. As I drove home, relief and rage struggled for control. 5 years as the family bank, and this is how I was treated. Little did I know, the aftermath from that dinner was only the beginning, and what happened next would put me to the test more than I ever imagined. Melissa's stillness was frightening. Days passed, then a week, and I heard nothing from her. No angry texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails, nothing. It seemed too quiet, like the calm before a storm. I kept telling myself I had done the right thing, but the nagging feeling that something was brewing kept me on edge. That something appeared late one night in the shape of a knock on my door. When I opened it, I wasn't expecting to see my parents standing there, their faces a mix of irritation and self-righteous outrage. "We need to talk about Melissa," Mom stated without hesitation, entering inside as if invited. Dad followed and closed the door behind him. I crossed my arms and leaned on the kitchen counter. "Do we?" "Because I think I've said everything I need to." "She's struggling, John," Dad said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Ellie doesn't deserve to suffer because of your stubbornness." I couldn't help but chuckle, and it wasn't out of amusement. "Let me get this straight. You two, who have spent the last 5 years on cruises and at wine tastings, want to lecture me about family responsibility? When exactly did you decide to care?" "That's not fair," Mom exclaimed, her face flaming. "We're retired. You're young and capable." "And she's your daughter," I replied, my wrath boiling out. "Funny how she's suddenly my responsibility now that you don't feel like dealing with it." The conversation continued in a familiar pattern of shame and blame. Mom's voice rose as she lectured me on family loyalty. Dad groaned deeply, shaking his head as if I were a disappointment. "You're being cold, John," Mom eventually said, her tone accusing. "This isn't like you." "Maybe not," I said, approaching the door and holding it open. "But it's how I'm going to be from now on. Thanks for stopping by." They departed muttering, but I felt strangely relieved. For once, I had stood my ground. The relief lasted exactly 2 days. Melissa contacted me out of the blue. I considered not responding, but curiosity got the best of me. "What do you want?" I inquired, ignoring pleasantries. Her tone was very light. "Just wanted to let you know, I'm moving out of the apartment next month." "Why?" I asked, frowning. "Can't afford it without me?" "Oh, I can afford it," she responded, her tone haughty. "I just don't want to. I'm moving back in with Mom and Dad." That hit me like a blow in the stomach. "What?" "They offered," she stated nonchalantly, as if it were no great thing. "They said they didn't want Ellie to suffer because of your little tantrum, so I'm putting my stuff in storage and moving into the guest room. Should be cozy." I could not find the words. The thought of Melissa reclining at my parents' house, rent-free and responsibility-free, while they made excuses for her was nearly too much to handle. "Oh, and one more thing," she said, her voice full of phony tenderness. "You might want to check your credit report. Just a heads up." My stomach sank. "What the hell does that mean?" She laughed. "You'll find out. Bye, Johnny." I hung up and instantly entered my credit card account. What I witnessed made my blood run cold. There it was. A new credit card account in my name, with a staggering balance. Thousands of dollars were charged to stores that I had never visited, all of which had opened within the last 6 months. Melissa had taken more than just my money. She had also stolen my identity. My hands shook as I stared at the computer, rage, bewilderment, and betrayal whirling through my chest. Helping her was one thing. Being fooled for a fool was something quite else. It wasn't just about shutting her off anymore. This was wartime. 2 weeks later, I was still dealing with the consequences of discovering Melissa's credit card fraud, hours on the phone with credit card companies and a lawyer. I submitted a police report not out of choice, but because my lawyer advised me to do so. I knew it would worsen things, but Melissa had given me no choice. Then came the shocker. I was at work, trying to concentrate on a project, when my phone vibrated with a text message from Uncle Rob. "Did you know your parents took out a loan? Thought you should hear it from me." A chill ran down my spine. "A loan? For what?" I called Uncle Rob immediately. He did not mince words. "They're paying off the rest of Melissa's debt," he stated plainly. "She went crying to them after you cut her off, and they decided to bail her out. They took a loan against the house to do it." My jaw clenched. "You've got to be kidding me." "I wish I was," Rob responded. "They didn't want you to find out, but I figured you deserved to know." I hung up, my blood blazing. They had gone over my back, enabling Melissa once more and jeopardizing their own financial stability in the process. Worse, they expected me to remain quiet and pick up the pieces when everything fell apart. That evening, I drove directly to my parents' place. When I walked in, they were sitting in the living room with Melissa, laughing as if everything was perfect. As soon as they saw me, their mood changed. "John," Mom said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here because I just found out about the loan," I explained, my voice quivering with barely restrained rage. "Care to explain?" Mom's face turned pale, but Dad stood up, his look hard. "We did what we had to do," he explained. "Ellie doesn't deserve to suffer because of your stubbornness." "And what about you?" I questioned, looking at Melissa. "What's your excuse this time? Stealing my identity wasn't enough?" Melissa crossed her arms, her voice defiant. "I did what I had to do, John. You cut me off. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to grow up," I snapped. "But instead, you ran back here and dragged them down with you." I turned to my parents. "And you let her. You're willing to jeopardize your own future just to enable her lies and manipulation. Do you even hear yourselves?" "We're protecting our family," Mom stated forcefully. "No, you're enabling her," I responded. "And I'm done being a part of it. Don't you dare walk out on this family," Dad shouted as I turned for the door. My heart pounded in my chest as I paused and returned my gaze to all of them. "You already walked out on me the moment you decided my sacrifices didn't matter. I've been your scapegoat long enough. From now on, you can clean up your own messes." Melissa smirked. "You'll be back, John. You always come back." I met her look with a hard voice. "Not this time. I walked out and slammed the door behind me. My phone was filled with angry texts from my parents and Melissa for the rest of the night. I disregarded them all. For the first time in years, I wasn't burdened by their expectations. I wasn't their banker, fixer, or fool anymore. I was free. This wasn't just disobedience, it was emancipation, and I had no intention of turning back. The fallout was immediate. Within hours of leaving my parents' place, the family group chat exploded. Messages from my dad and Melissa covered the screen, each more dramatic than the previous. Mom. You are pulling our family apart, John. Dad. You were raised to be better than this. Melissa. Ellie is heartbroken. You are a selfish coward. I put down my phone, tightened my jaw, and went for a walk. The night was crisp and peaceful, in stark contrast to the pandemonium raging in my mind. I felt raw, angry, sad, and relieved. For years, I'd carried the weight of my family's expectations, and now that I'd let go, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. The next day, I got an unexpected call from Uncle Rob. Heard about what happened, he answered sternly. Good for you, kid. Someone needed to stand up to them. I exhaled a breath that I hadn't realized I was holding. Thanks, Rob. I don't feel like the hero right now. You're not the hero, he stated bluntly. You're just the only one with any sense. His words provided me with a sense of validation. Still, the days that followed were difficult. My parents had stopped phoning, but the silence was not comfortable. I knew they were furious, and I knew it wasn't over. Melissa wasn't as quiet. She resorted to social media, writing vague yet pointed messages. It's sad when the people who are supposed to love you the most are the first to abandon you. And my personal favorite, family is supposed to be forever. Guess not for everyone. The genuine breaking point came a week later, when my folks invited me to supper. Despite my better judgment, I went. Perhaps I still hoped for a chance at reconciliation. When I arrived, the situation was tight. Melissa was already present, sitting at the table with a smug grin. Ellie was nowhere to be found. We need to talk, Dad said, his voice heavy. About how I'm the bad guy? I inquired, sitting down. About how you've handled this, Mom asked, her voice harsh. You didn't have to humiliate Melissa or threaten her with the police. She committed fraud, I stated, my voice rising. What did you expect me to do? Clap and say, great job, sis. You could have handled it privately, Dad retorted. You didn't have to escalate things. Privately? I scoffed. You mean quietly, so no one would see how you've enabled her for years? Melissa finally spoke up, her voice filled with wrath. You're just bitter because I didn't need you anymore. I rose up, my chair grinding loudly on the floor. You've never needed me, Melissa. You've just used me. And now you've dragged them down with you. John, Mom replied, her voice softening. Please, for Ellie's sake. This isn't about Ellie, I interjected. This is about you refusing to let her face the consequences of her actions. And I'm done being a part of it. I fled without looking back. That night, I sat on my couch, rehearsing the confrontation in my mind. The rage, the hurt, and the treachery. Everything was there. But there was something else. A sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't shouldering their burdens. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in my life. I resumed going to the gym, reconnected with friends, and focused on work. Uncle Rob had been correct. This was not about being a hero. Uncle Rob and I had supper one night, and he told me how proud he was of me. You're finally living for yourself, he told me. About damn time. It was not easy. The guilt persisted, especially when Ellie called one evening and asked why I hadn't come around anymore. I promised her that I loved her and would be there for her no matter what, but my determination remained firm. I'd learned a terrible lesson. Family does not entail losing your happiness, limits, or dignity. Sometimes, love entails stepping away. And as the days passed into weeks, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years. Tranquility. In the months that followed, my life changed in ways I never anticipated. Initially, the quiet from my parents and Melissa was deafening. For years, I was their safety net, go-to problem solution, and banker. Now it was just me. The lack of their continuous demands felt unusual, but it also allowed for something I hadn't experienced in a long time: serenity. I began to fill my days with activities that brought me delight. I finally joined a recreational basketball league after putting it off for years due to job and family obligations. I finally took a weekend trip to the mountains, a dream I had put off so many times that it began to feel like a fantasy. Standing by the shore of a peaceful lake, With no one texting me about bills, rent, or guilt-tripping me into solving their problems, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Work became a source of pride once again. Without the shadow of family trouble hanging over me, I poured my energies into a new project at work and received a promotion within 3 months. My coworkers also observed the change. "You seem lighter," one of them commented over a team meal. "Like you're finally breathing." They were correct. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Uncle Rob, my dependable sounding board, remained a constant presence in my life. He lifted a glass and smiled as he dined on meat. "Here's to you, kid, for finally learning how to say no." I chuckled, but his words stayed with me. Saying no had been the most difficult thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most important. Melissa, unsurprisingly, continued to play the victim. According to what I heard, she was still living at my parents' house, relying on them for assistance, and avoiding responsibility. Mom and Dad became increasingly frustrated, but their pride prevented them from acknowledging they had made a mistake. The true surprise came from Ellie. One afternoon, she called me from her mother's phone. "Uncle John," she spoke softly. "Can I come visit you? Mom says you're mad at us, but I miss you." Hearing her voice made my heart break a little. However, it also gave me hope. "Of course, you are welcome to visit," I replied kindly. "You're always welcome here." She came over the following weekend, and we spent the day baking cookies, watching movies, and discussing school. She hugged me goodbye and whispered, "Thanks for being my favorite uncle." That moment reminded me why I had battled so hard to establish boundaries. It wasn't just about protecting myself. I wanted to show Ellie what self-respect looked like. The lesson I learned was simple, yet deep. Standing up for oneself is not selfish. It is important. Family does not imply being a doormat. It denotes respect, support, and mutual caring. And if such things are missing, it is acceptable to walk away. The distance from my family was difficult, but it provided me the opportunity to create a life I could be proud of. I wasn't simply surviving anymore. I was thriving. For the first time in years, I felt like I was right where I was supposed to be. One evening, as I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset, I understood something important. I hadn't lost a family. I had regained myself. And that was a trade I would gladly make again. My parents manipulated me for money, favored my sister, and excluded my son from Christmas while inviting other kids. I never imagined I'd be a widow at 34, but here I am, Dakota, sitting at my kitchen table at 7 a.m., trying to get my 7-year-old son ready for school while holding back tears. It's been 8 months since Mark died in an accident on the building site, but it feels like yesterday. The initial months following Mark's death were a flurry of paperwork, sorrow, and sleepless nights. I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through without Sarah and Jim, my in-laws. They've been total angels, getting Tommy up from school every day so I can concentrate on work. I stop by their house afterward to get him, and every time, they want to give me money. "Sarah, really, I can't take this," I told her last week, holding back the envelope she attempted to sneak into my purse. "Dakota, sweetie, we want to help," she insisted, her gentle gaze finding mine. "We know the insurance company paid well, but your family. Let us do this." She's correct about the insurance. Following Mark's death, the firm paid out $300,000. With that and my job as a marketing manager, we're doing well financially, but it isn't about money for Sarah and Jim. It's about the love they offer us every day. If only my parents were half as supportive. Mom and Dad have always made it plain that my older sister Rachel was their favorite child, and now they prefer her children over Tommy. Last weekend was normal. Tommy was eager to see his grandparents, but Mom was already fussing about his questions after only 20 minutes. "Why does the clock make that sound?" Tommy inquired, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. "How does it work inside?" "Dakota, can't you control him?" Mom groaned and rolled her eyes. "He's always asking questions about everything. Rachel's kids never give us this much trouble." Dad nodded in agreement and reached for his laptop. "Here, Tommy, why don't you play some games instead?" "Look, I downloaded some new ones." Tommy, however, did not want to play games. He wanted to communicate, learn, and connect. Meanwhile, Rachel's 3 children sat in the corner, engrossed on their phones and barely noticing anyone's presence. And my parents portrayed this as the perfect behavior. I've learnt to bite my tongue. Growing up as the underfavored child, I became accustomed to these comparisons long ago. Now I just shake my head and remain mute when people compliment Rachel's parenting while condemning mine. At the very least, they help Tommy on occasion, such as watching him when I have late meetings or picking him up if both Sarah and Jim are busy. It was intended to be just another Tuesday dinner at my parents' home. The warning signs were present from the time I went in. Mom had prepared my favorite lasagna, which she generally only cooks when she wants something. Dad was particularly chatty, inquiring about work, Tommy, and pretty much everything. They were building toward something. I simply didn't know what. "So, Dakota," Mom remarked gently as she cut her lasagna into beautiful squares. "We've been meaning to ask you something." I took a sip of water to brace myself. How much was Mark's life insurance payout? The question struck me like a slap in the face. I nearly choked on my water, taken aback by such a forthright question about something so intimate. Perhaps it was the shock, or perhaps I was simply tired of hiding secrets from my parents, but I responded truthfully. "About $300,000, I replied gently. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's head shot up so swiftly that I felt he could injure himself. They looked at me as if I had just declared I had won the jackpot. "Well," Mom began, carefully setting down her fork, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" I could feel their expectations weighing down on me. "I've invested it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's for Tommy's future, his college education, maybe to help him buy an apartment when he's older. Mark and I always talked about." "But that's years away," Dad said, waving his hand dismissively. "You should be thinking about the present, Dakota. About yourself and your family." The way he stated family made it apparent he wasn't referring to Tommy. I recognized that tone. It was the same one they used to aid Rachel with her down payment for her house or to fund her extravagant wedding. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom added, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even—" "I'm not discussing my money anymore," I interrupted her, my voice harder than I wanted. The hush that followed was oppressive. They both sat back, Dad's expression clouded with displeasure, something I had seen so many times growing up. Mom squeezed her lips together in a thin line that always indicated difficulty. The rest of the dinner was spent in tight quiet, interrupted only by the scrape of forks against plates. I assumed that would be the end of it. Knowing my parents, I anticipated them to give me the silent treatment for at least a month. It was what they always did when I failed to meet their expectations. But to my astonishment, Mom called only a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she said, her voice as friendly as if nothing had happened. "Rachel and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." Something in her tone made me apprehensive, but I consented. When I came on Sunday, Rachel was already there with her 3 children, all of whom were hooked to their phones as usual. As we sat down to lunch, she began ranting about rising costs, accumulating bills, and how difficult it was to make ends meet. "These days, everything is just so expensive now," she complained, passing the potatoes. "Your father and I barely have enough for a normal life anymore," Mom explained, drying her eyes with a handkerchief as she discussed rising grocery prices and electricity bills. Rachel cleared her throat and sat straighter. "I've been thinking," she said, staring around the table with the same self-righteous attitude she'd had since we were children. "Dakota and I should help Mom and Dad financially. I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is. Jack's the only one working, and with 3 kids?" She paused, allowing that to sink in, before turning to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "But you, Dakota, you should send them $1,000 monthly." "Excuse me?" I nearly choked on the water. "Well, it makes sense," Rachel continued. "You earn really well at your job, and you only have 1 child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." Rachel's careful avoidance of mentioning Mark's death made my blood boil. I wanted to shout that I was a widow, that I no longer had my husband's income to rely on, and that the other income she was talking to was intended for my son's future. But Mom was already clapping her hands with joy, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh girls," Mom said. "You don't know what this means to us." I sat there, divided between fury and amazement, witnessing my family's hopeful expressions. The words of refusal died in my throat. I'd spent my entire life trying to gain their approval, and now they were putting a price on it. "Fine," I heard myself saying. "I'll do it." The first transfer was the most painful. $1,000 was gone with a few clicks. I convinced myself it was worthwhile if it meant more family support for Tommy. But that fantasy quickly dissipated. "Mom, could you pick Tommy up from school today? Sarah has a doctor's appointment and I have a late meeting." "Oh honey, I'm so sorry," Mom's voice cracked over the phone. "I've got such a headache today. You know how my migraines get." This became a pattern. There was always an explanation for why I required Tommy's assistance. Mom was too busy. She was exhausted. She had errands to run. Her back was acting up. Meanwhile, the $1,000 was automatically deducted from my account each month. One particularly unpleasant Thursday, after Mom claimed she couldn't care Tommy because she might be sick, I contacted Sarah in desperation. "Of course, we'll pick him up," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Jim's already heading to the school. He loves their little chats on the drive home. Tommy's been telling him all about their science project." I shut up the phone and sat at my desk, trying to hold back tears. $1,000 per month got me nothing but excuses from my own mother, whereas my mother-in-law dropped everything to help, without asking for a dime. December snuck up on me that year. We had always celebrated Christmas at my parents' house. It was a family tradition. Everyone came there to exchange gifts, share meals, and make memories. The call came exactly 1 week before Christmas. I was assisting Tommy with his homework when my phone lit up with Mom's number. "Dakota, honey," she began, using that syrupy sweet tone that always signaled terrible news. "About Christmas Eve. We've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil I was holding broke in my hand. "What?" "It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year," Mom explained, as if she were talking about something as insignificant as changing dinner plans. "You know, wine, adult conversation." "But it's Christmas," I objected, stepping back so Tommy couldn't hear. "What am I supposed to do with Tommy?" "Oh, that's easy," she said, her voice light and dismissive. "You can leave him with Sarah and Jim. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7. After hanging up, I gazed at Tommy, who was still working on his arithmetic problems, blissfully unconscious that his grandmother had just canceled his Christmas invitation. My heart wrenched as I watched him concentrate on his multiplication tables, his tongue hanging out like Mark's did. I spent the following week debating what to do. The idea of celebrating without Tommy felt terrible, but canceling the family Christmas together seemed too dramatic. Finally, I came up with a solution. I'd leave Tommy with Sarah and Jim for a few hours, go to my parents' place to exchange gifts and greetings, and then return to properly celebrate with my in-laws and son. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at my parents' house alone, carrying a bag of nicely wrapped presents. The driveway was packed with cars, more than typical for our family gatherings. Walking up to the front door, I could hear laughter and Christmas music filling the cold December air. When I opened the door, the world appeared to tilt sideways. The house was crowded with relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins, but that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. Rachel's 3 children ran through the living room wearing paper crowns. Near the Christmas tree, I noticed my cousin Linda's children eating cookies. More children emerged in my line of sight, my cousin Mark's twins and my cousin Susan's teenager. The room suddenly felt too hot and too cramped. As the truth of the situation dawned on me, I stood in the doorway with the present bag hanging limply from my palm. This was not an adults-only party at all. My son was the only one who was not invited to the celebration. I stood paralyzed, my mind straining to comprehend the scene in front of me. My aunt was the first to see me. "Dakota, sweetheart," she exclaimed, rushing over to hug me. She then looked around expectantly. "Where's little Tommy? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve?" Before I could respond, my cousin Peter interjected. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Jake's been wanting to show him his new chemistry set." More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Tommy? Why had I arrived alone? Each inquiry felt like a knife being twisted in my gut. I couldn't form words. I couldn't describe what I didn't comprehend. Through the bustle, I noticed my mother in the kitchen, placing cookies on a Christmas-themed tray as if everything were normal. As if she hadn't already omitted her sole grandson from a family event. "Excuse me," I managed to mutter, moving past my concerned family members. My feet took me to the kitchen on autopilot, rage rising with each stride. "Mom," I asked, my voice low and controlled. "Can we talk privately?" Something in my tone prompted her to put down the platter. I guided her into the corridor, away from inquisitive eyes and ears. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "You specifically told me not to bring Tommy. So why are Rachel's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom fixed her Christmas sweater, avoiding my gaze. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" "Those children," she remarked, nodding vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I looked at her in bewilderment. Well-mannered? Tommy is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior constantly. Sarah and Jim always say, "Oh, Sarah and Jim," Mom said, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him. Encourage all those endless questions. The other children, they deserve to be here more." They know their place. As if on cue, a disturbance broke out in the dining area. Rachel's youngest kid, Kevin, had taken a bunch of deviled eggs and was hurling them at his sister. The eggs flew across the room, splattering on Emily's beautiful Christmas dress as she screamed. I returned to my mother, lifting an eyebrow. Yes, I can clearly see their superior manners on display. Mom's expression tightened. That's just children being children. But when Tommy asks questions about how things work, that's unacceptable behavior? Don't be so dramatic, Dakota. He's fine with Sarah and Jim. I'm leaving, I said, turning toward the door. I'm going back to my son. Mom shrugged and examined her manicure. Fine. Leave if you want to make a scene, but put your gifts under the tree first. We're opening them after dinner. Something snapped within me. I stood there, looking at my mother's dismissive shrug. I walked into the center of the living room before I could think twice. I cleared my throat loudly, cutting through the festive music and conversation. Heads turned, conversations ended in mid-sentence, and all eyes were on me. Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight, I said, my voice stronger than I had anticipated. Why isn't Tommy here celebrating Christmas with his family? Rachel tried to approach me, but I held up my hand. Let me finish. I drew a breath and continued. I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Tommy. My aunt's voice broke through the hush. But all the children are here. We had no idea there was a ban on children, Uncle Steve explained, puzzled. Mom walked forward, her cheeks heated. Dakota, this isn't the time. Oh, I think this is exactly the time, I said, my voice raising slightly. Because, you see, there wasn't really a ban on children. There was a ban on one child, my child. My son, who apparently isn't good enough for this family's Christmas celebration. The room erupted in murmuring. I witnessed surprised expressions, disapproving looks at my parents, and perplexed youngsters as the adult drama unfolded. But that's not even the best part, I remarked with a dry laugh. While my son isn't good enough to attend Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Rachel here sends $500. Rachel's husband Jack raised his head. Wait. What? $500? Rachel's cheeks drained of color as Jack turned to face her. You're sending your parents money every month? From where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is. Rachel's composure snapped. Her cheeks flushed scarlet as she stared at our parents and her husband. I never actually sent any money, she said. The room was stunned into silence. Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Dakota would agree to help them financially. They said if she thought I was contributing too, she'd feel obligated. The hush that ensued was deafening. I watched as my relatives' features softened as they realized what had happened, how my parents and sister had duped me into financially supporting them while ignoring my child from family gatherings. Aunt Caroline's words rang out sharply and clearly. Aunt Caroline's words rang out sharply and clearly. You scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars? You're nothing but scammers, using your own daughter like an ATM while treating her kid like dirt. That's low, even for you two. The gathering erupted in overlapping voices, with some expressing disdain and others demanding explanations. Rachel was attempting to explain herself to an increasingly enraged Jack, as my parents stood there, their carefully constructed facade falling around them. I raised my hand, drowning out the continued disputes around me. I have something else to say. The room became quiet again, and all eyes returned to me. Mom and Dad remained motionless before the Christmas tree, their faces ashen. Rachel was still explaining herself to Jack, but even they paused to listen. From this moment on, my voice was clear and firm. I will no longer be sending you any money. And I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Rachel. I'm done. Without waiting for an answer, I turned and went out, leaving the bag of gifts at the door. The sound of the door closing behind me felt final, like the end of a chapter I should have concluded years ago. Sitting in my car, I took out my phone and accessed the banking app. With a few fast touches, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like severing a cord that had been dragging behind me for months. The journey to Sarah and Jim's residence seemed to take both forever and nothing at all. When I parked into their driveway, I noticed Tommy through the window, helping Sarah decorate Christmas cookies. The sight of him, happy and loved, brought tears to my eyes. We spent the rest of Christmas with Sarah and Jim, baking cookies, singing songs, and watching Tommy's eyes light up as he assisted Jim build the nativity scene. This, I understood, is how family should feel. My phone rang the next morning, while Tommy was still sleeping among the goodies Santa had brought him. It was Aunt Caroline. You might want to hear how things ended last night, she said without elaborating. After you left, it was like a dam broke. Uncle Mike stood up and said he couldn't stay in that house another minute. Then Aunt Marie and Uncle Steve followed. Pretty soon, everyone was gathering their coats and kids. I listened as she told how the relatives had all departed together, without even saying goodbye to my parents. As they walked out, some appeared to make loud comments about deceptive behavior and family shame. And Jack? I inquired quietly. Oh honey, he was livid. Packed up the kids right then and there. Told Rachel he needed time to think about their marriage. Said he was taking the children to his parents' house for Christmas. Rachel was crying. Your parents were trying to do damage control, but it was too late. I overheard her take a deep breath. I want you to know, Dakota, we're all on your side. What they did to you and Tommy, it's unforgivable. After I hung up, I sat on my bed, absorbing everything. My phone began to buzz with notifications. Text messages from Mom, Dad, and Rachel. They all said variations on the same thing. We're sorry, we were wrong, please talk to us, we can explain. I read every message once. Then I archived them without replying. The week between Christmas and New Year's was a calm haze. Tommy and I spent quiet evenings with Sarah and Jim, playing board games, watching Christmas movies, and relishing the simple pleasure of being with people who genuinely loved us. On New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I noticed Mom and Dad standing on my porch, clutching a large, carefully wrapped box. My heart pounded against my ribs as I considered whether to open the door. Dakota, we know you're home. Mom said, her voice muffled by the door. Please, we just want to talk. After a brief hesitation, I opened the door but remained firmly in the entryway, preventing their access. They appeared smaller, less threatening than they did a week before. We brought this for Tommy, Dad explained, holding out the item. Through the wrapping paper, I noticed the logo of a high-end electronics retailer. He doesn't need it, I said, making no attempt to accept the present. Please, Dakota, Mom came forward. We know we were wrong, the way we treated Tommy, the manipulation with the money, we're truly sorry. And we want you to know, he said hurriedly, that this isn't about the money you were sending us. We really do feel terrible about everything. I examined their faces, looking for authenticity. Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong? Or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and won't speak to you anymore? They exchanged glances. In that quick glance, I had my answer. I think you should leave, I answered gently. I don't believe you. And I don't trust you. Not anymore. But we're family, Mom insisted, tears welling in her eyes. No. I shook my head. Families don't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did? That's not family. They ultimately left, still carrying the undesired present and leaving their apologies behind as they walked to their car. I watched them drive away, not sorrowful, but relieved. In the months that followed, I stood by my decision. I did not answer their calls or texts. Rachel also tried to contact me, but I disabled her phone number. Instead, the money I had been paying to my parents was transferred to Tommy's education fund. The strange thing about removing toxic individuals from your life is how much space it creates for better relationships to develop. Aunt Caroline began inviting us over for Sunday dinners. Uncle Mike and his wife invited us over for barbecues, where Tommy could play with his cousins. Everyone made an effort to include him, asking him about his interests and encouraged him to ask questions. Tommy inquired one summer afternoon, Mom, why does Uncle Mike's pool have that funny smell? That's the chlorine, buddy, Uncle Mike said before I could respond, embarking into an explanation of water treatment and chemical processes that captivated Tommy. I witnessed my son blossom under the care and devotion of family members who genuinely wanted to know him, not change him. He began calling Sarah and Jim Grandma and Grandpa solely. And they continued to be our bedrock, our safe haven in whatever storm. My wife won $9 million, filed for divorce, and kicked me out, but she forgot the prenup her parents forced me to sign before marriage. My wife won a $9 million lottery, filed for divorce, and kicked me out, but she forgot about the prenup that her parents compelled me to sign before our marriage. I am from a humble family. My parents live in a quiet suburb, and I grew up in a little 3-bedroom house that always smelled like fresh laundry and homemade food. After high school, I worked a variety of odd jobs, including bartending, helping at my uncle's hardware store, and eventually managing a local sporting goods store. It was not glamorous, but it was genuine. My wife, on the other hand, came from a world that I had never known. Her parents owned several properties, drove expensive automobiles, and threw enormous, extravagant parties a few times every year. Let's name my father-in-law Phil, and my mother-in-law Maëlle. Maëlle was a tall, imposing figure who exudes quiet power in every setting. He'd make casual comments that seemed more like disguised threats or manipulations. Maëlle was also good at gently expressing disapproval. Just one raised eyebrow could make others shrink. They were never blatantly nasty in front of me, but I could always sense their displeasure behind the polite talk. After my wife and I got engaged, I learned how much her parents feared that outsiders would take their family assets. They treated me like an intruder, despite the fact that my wife and I had been dating for years. Before we could set a wedding date, Phil insisted that I sign a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the money to fight it legally, and I was too consumed by love. I kept telling myself it was a symbolic gesture to placate her parents. Isn't love the only promise I needed? The day I signed is very clear in my mind. It was a warm afternoon in her parents' huge house. Mel spread down the document and slipped a pen in my direction. He gave me coffee, almost as if it were a regular business transaction. My wife stood to the side and said little. That hurt, but I dismissed it, assuming it wouldn't matter in the long term. The contract stated that any gifts, inheritances, or trust funds from her family remained her own property. However, any big item we acquired together, such as a house or lottery winnings, would be marital property. That seemed unusual to me, but all I wanted was to marry her. 6 months later, we married in a beautiful lakeside wedding. My parents were overwhelmed by the luxury yet remained supportive. My father's expression was tense as he greeted my in-laws. He'd always taught me to trust my instincts, but I assumed love would remove any doubts. The first several years passed without any noteworthy incidents. We resided in a condominium that her parents helped us get. I made monthly payments on the mortgage, despite the fact that the down payment came from her father's gift. Looking back, it was never actually a gift, but rather a tool for controlling us. But back then, I assumed that this was how wealthy families operated. Our marriage had the normal money squabbles and occasional outbursts about our parents interfering with our decisions. They'd arrive unexpectedly, bring new furniture or decor, and occasionally reorganize our entire living space without notice. My wife would dismiss my frustration, blaming it on her parents' supportive nature. Then came the day that everything flipped upside down. My wife called me, ecstatic, to tell me she had won a $9 million lottery prize with a random ticket she purchased at a petrol station. At first, I was overjoyed, fantasizing about quitting our jobs and exploring the world, but my excitement gradually faded. She insisted we keep it a secret, even from my parents. She got strangely paranoid, talking about claiming the money correctly and meeting with lawyers I'd never met before. When I asked to attend these meetings, she told me I'd be out of place, which stung. I had no idea the main surprise was about to occur. One afternoon, I returned home from work fatigued to discover her searching through drawers with her aunt. She casually announced that she was filing for divorce and instructed me to pack my bags and leave the apartment, which she claimed was under her name. I was floored. Sure, I paid monthly mortgage payments, but she clearly thought her father's original down payment and her newfound wealth rendered me useless. I felt my heart break. I contacted my father, my voice cracking, and told him I had just been booted out of my own home. It was the ultimate treachery. The biggest shock came next. I learned that my father-in-law had sent his personal attorney to protect her. They wanted me out so they could keep the lotto earnings separate from me. Except they'd forgotten the provisions of the prenuptial agreement they'd forced on me. Instead of completely protecting their daughter, it declared that any windfall obtained during marriage counted as a shared asset. I then understood that if they insisted on divorce me immediately after winning the jackpot, they might not be able to keep anything. I decided to go cautiously. My father advised me to remain calm, hire a lawyer outside their social circle, and prepare for a nasty struggle. I was determined not to fold. They'd thrown down the gauntlet, treating me like a disposable annoyance. If they believed I'd walk away peacefully, they were greatly mistaken. I spent a few nights at my folks' house, attempting to process the shock. My mother was furious, shouting about how rude my in-laws had been from the beginning. My father, while also outraged, remained pragmatic. He contacted an old buddy, a family law attorney, and scheduled an appointment for me first thing in the morning. Sitting in that attorney's office, I felt a mixture of rage and relief. I told him about how my in-laws insisted on the prenup, how my wife had earned $9 million, and how she then surprised me with divorce. He chuckled as he reviewed the prenuptial agreement. They shot themselves in the foot, he told me. They specifically included language that lumps lottery winnings under marital assets. Unless a judge does some wild legal interpretation, you're entitled to a substantial portion. This was a lifeline for me. I was scared the prenup would keep me out, but it turned out that their fear of me claiming inherited wealth outweighed the potential of a jackpot scenario. My lawyer cautioned that it would not be simple. My in-laws were wealthy, well-connected, and likely to deploy a large legal team, but he believed we had a good case, especially given I had contributed financially to the marriage and had been unceremoniously evicted from our shared residence. I inquired about the divorce proceedings in our state. A disputed divorce can last months or longer, but if my wife's side realizes they are on shaky ground, they may seek an early settlement. The lawyer warned that they would use intimidation or underhanded tactics to persuade me to give away my rights cheaply. Within a few days, my father-in-law left me a frightening message, asking me to back off since I deserved nothing from his daughter. He claimed that if I sought to collect the lottery prizes, he would ensure that I received nothing. My lawyer just instructed me to document everything. Then, my mother-in-law cornered me outside my parents' house, suggesting a pathetic, silent exit. She portrayed it as a fantastic bargain, but it wasn't even enough to cover half of my mortgage payments. I declined, stating we'd see each other in court. She scoffed, perplexed by my refusal, obviously unaccustomed to anyone refusing her money. With negotiations at a deadlock, my lawyer filed petitions to prevent the lottery monies from being hidden or moved. That incensed my in-laws, who began spreading rumors about me being a gold digger who preyed on their young daughter. It stung, but I remained strong. My supervisor, who owned the sports goods store, had my back, dismissing my father-in-law's attempts to interfere with my employment. Friends took sides, some calling me petty, while others praised me for fighting back. The stress was unbearable, but I refused to succumb. We finally got a court date after several weeks of unsuccessful negotiations. My wife was not to be found. Personally, she was practically under her parents' protective wing, avoiding any direct communication with me. She let her lawyers do the talking, alleging I was a leech who gave nothing to the marriage. My lawyer objected, citing financial records, bill time sharing, and a specific prenuptial clause regarding windfalls. We also discussed how I had been violently kicked out of the condo. The judge directed both parties to prepare for a more formal hearing on asset partition. In one final attempt at intimidation, my father-in-law threatened my employer again, who swiftly instructed him to leave. That simply made my father-in-law angrier. My lawyer advised us to proceed carefully, but he was certain that a judge would see through their scare tactics. Nothing could have prepared me for the ultimate fight in court, but I knew the law was on my side, paradoxically, because to the very prenup they'd imposed on me. Weeks passed, and the anticipation for the approaching hearing reached fever pitch. My wife still avoided direct contact with me, but her lawyers inundated me with motions. They maintained that the lottery gain was separate property because she purchased the ticket, despite the fact that the prenup stated that any large windfall during marriage was marital. Meanwhile, my father-in-law attempted to ruin my reputation among friends and business acquaintances by spreading the myth that I was a gold digger who had married into the family purely for money. During this time, I had a combination of frustration and motivation. If they thought they could bully me out of my rights, they were mistaken. I had records that demonstrated how I contributed to our shared existence, such as electricity bills, groceries, and half mortgage payments. My attorney and I went over every element of the prenup. He highlighted a significant clause stating that any pecuniary windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winners, are deemed marital assets unless expressly stated differently. It was as if my in-laws had accidentally left a back door open. A week before the hearing, we held a preliminary status conference. My wife arrived with her parents and a team of lawyers, 4 attorneys and a financial advisor. They looked at me with the same air of superiority, but their attitude softened when my lawyer quietly showed the prenuptial agreement, emphasizing the specific clause about lottery money. The judge listened attentively, appeared unimpressed by their attempts to dismiss the case, and ordered that all substantial assets be frozen until the main hearing. That same day, my mother-in-law cornered me outside the courthouse, insisting we speak like adults. She tried to provide a flat payment that was much lower than before, calling it generous for someone of my background. I refused again, telling her that we'd let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, as if I had surprised her daughter with a divorce. The hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I remained calm. My lawyer had told me not to engage in heated confrontations that could be used against me later. Behind the scenes, I was terrified that my in-laws might try to hide the lottery earnings in hidden accounts. My lawyer, anticipating this possibility, filed court orders to block any substantial transfers. We also planned to have a forensic accountant ready in case we suspected them of hiding monies. My father-in-law's temper flared. He left me a voicemail calling me filthy and accusing me of taking the love from his daughter's life. It was lavish, given that they were the ones who kicked me out immediately after winning the lottery. As the hearing neared, I meticulously planned with my counsel. We practiced my statement to ensure I seemed calm and factual in court. I had papers of the prenup, receipts for the partially paid mortgage, and even texts from my wife confirming our joint bills. The lawyer advised me to make my replies succinct, but the evidence will speak for itself. If they attempted emotional theatrics, we would respond with precise documentation. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, my heart racing. My parents attended me for moral support, but they remained outside the courtroom. When the proceedings began, I noticed my wife seated near her father, both sporting stone-cold looks. Her mother lingered in the back, arms folded. My father-in-law's lawyers, dressed in glossy suits, were confident, maybe hoping that money and legal strength could overcome the facts. The judge, a severe woman in her 50s, didn't waste time. She invited each side to submit their arguments. My wife's main attorney attempted to portray me as a small contributor who had done little more than share the same living environment. They claimed the lottery purchase was a personal transaction made using her money. But my lawyer calmly reminded me that the prenup specifically includes such windfalls as marital property. We also have bank records indicating she had used our joint account card that day. When we presented the information, I noticed visible tension in my father-in-law's camp. The judge inquired whether they had any more paperwork indicating it was her personal money. They fumbled, claiming that the card had been used unintentionally or that it was her father's deposit into the account. But the statements clearly identified our names, not just hers. The judge took note, her attention going to them with anticipation. Eventually, my wife spoke. She said she never intended to upset me, and that her parents pushed for a divorce once the prize was won to protect family assets. She fumbled over her words, acknowledging she was under pressure but also attempting to excuse it by claiming that if anyone found out about the money, they would come after us. My lawyer inquired whether she consulted me before making these judgments. She admitted number. The judge's disdain was evident. By midday, it was evident that their prenuptial agreement was a double-edged sword. The exact document they'd used to isolate their money now threatened to put a large sum of lottery prizes in my hands. The court ordered a second hearing for final judgments, noting that she preferred to approach the lottery as a significant marital asset subject to equitable division. Outside, my father-in-law went by me, mumbling, "This is far from over," but his confidence was clearly shaken. Their desperation grew in the weeks before the ultimate verdict. My father-in-law's lawyers tried everything, submitting motions to revise the prenuptial agreement's terms, arguing the goal was not to include lottery winnings. The judge dismissed the motions, citing the plain text. My mother-in-law tried to corner me again, warning me that if I hurt their family, I would regret it. I told her straight up that they'd started this by pushing me out and surprising me with a divorce. My wife attempted to contact me, leaving an emotional voicemail expressing her desire for things to end amicably. She offered that if we just had a secret agreement, we might be able to recover some of our relationship. I would have considered it if they had treated me fairly from the beginning, but after the intimidation, falsehoods, and forced removal, my trust had evaporated. My lawyer warned me not to engage in these back-channel discussions. We had a strong legal position and no reason to settle for crumbs. Finally, the day for the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was filled with attorneys from both sides. My father, mother, and a few friends arrived to support me, sitting silently at the back. The judge took the bench, reviewed the amended documents, and approved final remarks. My father-in-law's lead lawyer took one final shot, portraying me as a crafty opportunist who uncovered the prenup's loophole after benefiting from the family's generosity. My lawyer responded with plain facts. 1. They compelled me to sign the prenuptial agreement. 2. It specifically mentioned the lottery or other windfall as shared property. 3. My father-in-law financed a portion of our condo, but I contributed monthly, so it was not a completely independent asset. Furthermore, the quick divorce petition following the prize was typical evidence of their plan to keep me from the rewards. The judge listened intently and then issued her decision. She stated that the lottery wins definitely fell under marital assets under the prenup's terms. She chastised my in-laws for attempting to pervert the agreement they had drafted. She also determined that my wife's abrupt expulsion of me from the condo was unfair, and that I was entitled to repayment for my share of the mortgage and marital contributions. In brief, the judge issued an order stating that I would receive a significant portion of the lottery winnings, as well as compensation for my condo part. We parted ways, with a finalization date set for a few weeks later just to complete papers. My father-in-law's expression was thunderous, and my mother-in-law was incensed, whispering fiercely to him. My wife stood there with tears in her eyes, either from genuine remorse or fury over the loss of so much money. I felt both vindication and grief. We used to love one another, but greed, parental influence, and their attempts to exploit me destroyed everything. In the aftermath, their lawyers attempted to provide a slightly changed settlement, most likely expecting I'd accept a lower figure to avoid more complications. My lawyer urged that we accept the judge's decision as is. We had no reason to cut it. The only concession I made was to give up any stake in the condominium. I never wanted to step foot in that place again. They cut me a check for an amazing amount. Was that half the jackpot? Not quite, but it was large enough to allow me to reconstruct my life comfortably. Throughout it all, I concluded that my in-laws, in their hubris, assumed that wealth would protect them from consequences. They did not expect me to fight back effectively. Ironically, the prenuptial agreement they insisted on became the tool that secured my part of the winnings. If there was ever poetic justice, this was it. My wife, as far as I know, is still under her parents' care. She's lost face in her social circle as a result of the chaos that ensued. Some common acquaintances have informed me she is grappling with guilt, but I doubt she would ever openly recognize her family's role in planning this. As a token of appreciation for their support, I used a portion of the settlement to assist my parents in upgrading their home. Another chunk was invested, and while the entire experience left me scarred, changing my perspective on trust, marriage, and money, I find comfort in knowing I remained firm. I refused to be bullied into taking table scraps. Although it was brutally painful, the end result felt like a victory over oppression. Now, free of my in-laws' deceptive grip, I'm moving on. I've returned to a simpler existence, which is oddly reminiscent of my pre-marriage days, but I'm stronger, wiser, and far from the naive man they thought they could steamroll. If they remember anything about me, it should be that they unintentionally provided me with the legal tool I needed to avoid going bankrupt. They launched the war, I completed it, and that concludes this chapter. My brother threw a party to spite me the night before my wedding. My parents chose it over mine, and I filed for a restraining order. My brother threw a birthday party the night before my wedding to spite me. My parents preferred his party over my wedding and arrived at my house at 4 a.m. to harass me. I was married a few days ago, but my family did not attend. My brother, Gerald, was not even invited because we don't like one another. That was not surprising, but my parents did not turn up. Gerald decided at the last minute to have a wild 28th birthday party the night before my wedding. He sent out invites to all of our family approximately a week before my wedding, simply to be petty and nasty because he had not been invited. It was quite a big thing. He had booked up a large facility and gone all out with entertainment, hiring a live band and a stand-up comedian to play. I'm only assuming that the catering and drink arrangements were on line with the performance. Although the performers are not particularly well known on a national scale, they are well known on the local circuit. Aside from that, I think everything would have been fairly pricey. My cousin showed me the invitation, and for a few minutes, I was concerned that people would attend his celebration rather than our wedding. Even if they chose to do so, there was little we could do about it. My wife and I both understood that individuals would have to choose. They couldn't attend the party the night before and then attend our wedding the next day because the party was in the city and we were getting married in a hotel about 8 hours away. We did not want to say anything to our guests. We wanted to allow everyone to make their own decisions, and we were extremely fortunate that everyone opted to attend the wedding. In retrospect, it is silly that we were concerned in the first place, because a wedding is far more important than a birthday. My parents were the only ones who did not attend, which was surprising. Even though we had a quarrel a few days before our wedding, I didn't anticipate them to attend his party and then skip the ceremony. The fight had occurred on a call 4 days before the wedding. After that, I became quite busy with last-minute preparations and was unable to call them. They didn't bother either, but I never imagined they'd skip it, especially since the wedding is such an important occasion in someone's life, especially when it's your own child. The fight was also about the wedding and birthday. After my cousin showed me the invitation, I called my parents to explain what was going on. I assumed they were going to be on my side, explaining things to my brother and convincing him to back down. Instead, they began telling me that it was my responsibility for not inviting him to the wedding and putting our previous disagreements aside. They stated he had every right to be petty, and I couldn't expect them to step in and try to defuse the issue because we weren't kids anymore, and they didn't believe it would be appropriate. I have to admit that I was unhappy with my parents. They were attempting to rationalize my brother's actions, despite the fact that they were extremely cruel and petty. So I confronted them about it, and we got into a brief fight. I ultimately hung up, telling them that if they truly believed he was doing the right thing by causing difficulty for us, they could just go to his party and skip the wedding. I did not speak with them again until the morning of the wedding day. While we were driving to the hotel, I kept attempting to phone them because they were meant to accompany us, but the car we had sent for them had returned empty. The driver told us that he had repeatedly tried to ring the doorbell and call our parents, but no one responded. I tried to call them all day, but nobody responded. At night, I was expected to concede that they might not make it the following day. Even in the morning, right before the ceremony, I expected them to arrive and attempted to call them, but they did not. I had to marry without them. I would have been upset, but I was about to marry the love of my life, so these things didn't affect me at the time. After the wedding, I decided not to bother contacting them again because they had already missed the most important milestone of my life. Later that evening, at the reception, they finally called me back. I responded out of curiosity, wanting to know what they had to say to me. When I picked up, they informed me that because I had instructed them not to attend the wedding, they had done so. Despite this, they still wanted to congratulate me. I assumed they were talking about the wedding, but they later explained that they were congratulating me not only on the wedding, but also on getting my way. Obviously, no one in the family had bothered to attend the celebration. My parents were unhappy with me, and they made it apparent over the phone that they thought I had said something to everyone else to turn them against my brother. Not only had they skipped the party, but they had also chastised and reprimanded him about his actions via messages and phone calls. Even though his friends and coworkers had attended the party, it had been a huge waste because he had expected a large number of people to show up, but just a few did. Gerald is now not only dissatisfied with the rest of the family, but he has also wasted a significant amount of money. This is meant to be my responsibility because my parents truly believed that I had said something to turn the rest of the family against him, despite the fact that any normal human being would have behaved similarly. So, while I was on the phone with them, I excused myself from reception and went out to discuss the problem. I told them how sad I was that they had opted to forgo my wedding over such trivial matters. Furthermore, they were ridiculing me right now for getting my way, despite the fact that the rest of the family had already made their decision. I was upset with them, so I ripped into them. They told me they didn't care what I thought since they knew I was envious and insecure about my brother, which is why I'm acting this way. That was the final straw, so I hung up, blocked them, and vowed to spend the rest of the evening without thinking about these guys. I did not want them to ruin the happiest day of my life. It's been a few days since the wedding, so I finally decided to issue a statement on what transpired. Many people were perplexed as to why my parents had chosen to forego the wedding, as they couldn't believe they had chosen Gerald's celebration instead. I decided to send an email to all of the guests, outlining the entire situation in detail, including the party my brother had hosted, the disagreement my parents had with me, and what I had told them about not showing up to the wedding. Then I told them about the quarrel we had over the phone during reception. Basically, I laid everything out and didn't spare any details. Everyone is now cutting them off, and they are once again blaming me for it, claiming that I go out of my way to cause drama and be spiteful toward my family. That could be the case, so I talked about why my parents did not attend my wedding in detail, turning the rest of the family against them. Okay, since many of you have asked why my brother and I don't get along, there's no particular reason. Even as children, we were not particularly close, but as we grew older, we became increasingly distant. He always seemed to be a little jealous of me, constantly mimicking me and whatnot, which used to irritate me. So we began fighting, and by the time we started high school, we truly disliked each other. Then I left for college and stayed for employment. I would go home on occasion, but he was really unpleasant even then. He would make disparaging remarks about my appearance, my salary, and other topics. It used to really irritate me, so I just started ignoring him because I knew I'd have to see him and it didn't seem worth it to reply to him and provoke fights. After a while, he recognized that I was not going to give him the satisfaction of genuinely reacting to him, so we simply stopped talking to each other. Even at family events, we would ignore each other. So there wasn't a specific occurrence that prompted us to behave in this manner. It was simply a series of bad occurrences throughout the years that led to our disagreement. I did not invite him to the wedding. I do not believe I did anything wrong. I don't think he expected to be invited, and if he did, it would have been an unfair expectation. My parents also know and understand why I stopped speaking to him. They attempted to patch things up at first, but it failed, so they eventually gave up. But they had never been more supportive of him or me, as far as I could tell. They had always tried to be fair to both of us, so I was astonished by their latest attitude. It felt like they were being unnecessarily biased against him, which had never happened before. Anyway, that's what it is. I can't help myself now. Update number 1. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who left comments. It felt good to be told that this is not my fault and that I had nothing to apologize for. All of the emails from my parents that had been flooding my inbox since I revealed the truth to the rest of the family have been deleted, and I've blocked them everywhere. They can continue to try to create new accounts and contact me, but I will not retract what I wrote about them. Besides, it's not like I made it up and began spewing irritating fake information about them. I just told the truth in the email I wrote to everyone in the family. I didn't even discuss my personal feelings. I simply stated the facts as it stood. People were free to make their own decisions about what they wanted to do, and if others want to cut them off because of their behavior, that's not my problem. On the day of the wedding, they had already accused me of attempting to turn the rest of the family against Gerald, so I merely did what they had accused me of. Why should I be punished without even committing the crime? Anyway, what I did was far less underhanded and pathetic than what they are attempting to do right now. My cousins and a few other relatives have sent me the email they sent in response to mine, which stated that I have always been jealous and insecure of Gerald. Even though my brother threw a last-minute birthday celebration, it was only because I went out of my way to make him feel horrible, and he retaliated as a result. They made up this incident that never happened, in which, apparently, a couple of weeks after I had sent out the invitations to the rest of the family, I called Gerald up to mock him about the fact that I was inviting the rest of the family but not him because he was simply not good enough to make the cut. Apparently, I had informed Gerald that my in-laws come from a wealthy family, and I didn't want them to know that my brother was a lazy freelancer. Obviously, I had not done anything like that, and anyone who knows me well would not believe it. The rest of the family doesn't believe anything they say about me, so I haven't bothered to clarify anything. I know they are lying, and nobody will believe them. But I have to say, it's really funny that they had to lie to make me look like the bad guy in order to clean up their own image and reputation. They aren't even helping themselves. Instead, they are making matters worse. I honestly don't understand why they are so determined to make me the bad person right now, especially because I don't believe I've done anything to harm them aside from one email. It does not make sense to me. However, it is apparent that they are desperate and are currently grabbing at straws. For me, this is the end of a chapter, and I'm going to focus on my time as a newlywed because it won't come back. I can handle the drama afterward. I'm very sure this isn't the end of the story, and they'll do their best to drag it out like chewing gum. Update number 2. So, it's been a week since my last post, and Gerald and my parents decided to include me in a conference call yesterday evening. They were both phoning from burner phones, so I don't have their phone numbers preserved, but it's easy to figure out who it was. I was at home with my wife, so I decided to answer the phone and chat with them because I wanted to mess with them, which I did. As soon as I picked up, I pretended not to hear them for around 5 minutes. Even though they had called to yell at me, they had to ensure that they were audible. So, before saying anything, they had to coordinate with me, which was extremely amusing. Anyway, they eventually got down to business and began telling me that the rest of the family was not on good terms with them. Everyone was angry with their actions and believed my parents and Gerald were exceedingly petty. So they expect me to do something about it. I had no idea what they had in mind, so I inquired what they wanted me to do. Even though I had no intention of consenting to it, I chose to play along for fun. But, of course, they assumed I was honest, so they informed me that a lot of things had been said by all of us, and that at the end of the day, the only thing that was hurting us was our family's reputation as a group. I found it interesting that they were saying so because, in my opinion, the entire incident had done nothing to damage my image or reputation. People still liked me, but I guess they simply wanted me to believe that this was about me or my image so that I would be more willing to do whatever they asked of me. Anyway, they told me that they wanted to send out another email stating that we had decided to work things out amongst ourselves and forgive each other since, after all, we are still family. They stated that the only way we would be able to repair our reputation right now was because they did not want to become a laughingstock and subject of gossip for the rest of the family as a result of this incident. But, unfortunately for them, I could see straight through them. I realized they were simply pretending to forgive each other because they knew no one believed any of the lies they had been spreading about me. If they didn't want to be excluded from the rest of the family, they had to pretend that everything was okay between us again and that I had forgiven them, so that the rest of the family would do the same. But I'd had enough of messing around by then, so I politely declined and stated unequivocally that it was they who wanted to repair their reputation, not me. I had no reason to pretend I had forgiven them. I also had a major issue with how they framed it, implying that we had forgiven each other, because I don't believe they are in a position to forgive me. I've done nothing wrong. I may have shouted some things in the heat of the moment, but it was ultimately their decision to miss my wedding and attend the birthday celebration. Whatever happens after that is the result of their actions. Besides, after all the lies they've been spreading about me, I don't want to appear weak and pretend to have forgiven them. So I made it apparent to them that I did not agree with what they had proposed. If they wanted to remain angry with me and continue to disseminate lies about me in the hopes that someone would believe them and they would be able to justify everything, they were free to do so. My parents, as well as Gerald, were furious as a result. He told me that it was entirely my fault, that if I had just done the decent thing instead of being petty and not asking him to such an important family occasion, none of this would have occurred. It was evident that he felt slighted, and for a second, I felt horrible. But then it was my wedding. I'm not obligated to invite everyone, especially when I don't even get along with them, and they know it. So I told Gerald that, and we had a disagreement over the phone. He called me selfish, and I told him he was silly to expect me to invite him, especially because we had had little communication aside from family occasions for the preceding few years. If he wanted me to be good to him, perhaps he should have treated me the same way. But, as far as I can recall, he has never invited me to any of the celebrations he has given, even though they have never been as important as a wedding or even an engagement. But it is beside the point. The point is, he's never been friendly to me, so I don't understand why he expected to be invited to the wedding. Anyway, after a while, everything were too loud and obnoxious. Gerald was shrieking, and my parents were ranting about something else, and I couldn't understand anything, so I just hung up and blocked their burner phone numbers as well. I would not say I completely regret it. I had some fun with them, but I have to say that if they contact me again, I doubt I'll answer. As enjoyable as it was at the beginning, it became quite taxing by the end, and I'm finished. Update number 3. Hello, well, it has been a few days since my last update. Today, around 4 a.m., my phone began to buzz. When I checked, it was an unknown number, so I didn't answer because I was confident it was Gerald or one of my parents phoning. And, again, it was 4 a.m., so I had no intention of getting into anything with them at that time, especially since I had to get to work in a few hours. But then, around half an hour after I didn't answer the phone, we started hearing people shouting outside our house and someone ringing the doorbell non-stop while also hammering on the door. Obviously, it was really unsettling, and it took us a few moments to grasp what was happening. But soon enough, my wife and I realized that it was my parents and Gerald outside, and we were hearing their voices. They demanded that we open up and that they needed to speak with us because what I was doing was wrecking their life. They stated that they had been completely cut off from the rest of the family, and it was all my fault. Now, if it had been any other time of day, I would have been somewhat annoyed, but it was 4 a.m., so I was enraged. Because, aside from that, they simply cannot harass people in this manner, and they were actually quite loud. I was sure the neighbor could hear them as well, but they didn't say anything about it afterward and were kind enough to pretend nothing occurred. I knew they had been startled by the ruckus outside, which made me feel pretty embarrassed. Anyway, when I heard them outside, I didn't think twice. I simply called the cops on them because I'd had enough. My wife and I sat in bed and let kids scream themselves hoarse while we waited for the cops to arrive. We were both really outraged about whatever was going on, so we didn't get out of bed until the cops arrived. Then we detailed the full issue and got them removed from our land. But by then, we'd lost a lot of sleep and had to miss work today. It's incredibly annoying that we lost an entire day of work due to them and their illogical actions. I can't understand why they were so upset about people not speaking to them at that time. But, anyhow, we've had enough, and if anything else happens, I believe we'll need to file for a restraining order. Moving or replacing numbers is a major undertaking that may be costly or time-consuming, hence this is not currently possible. But that's the least we can do, even though they haven't explicitly threatened us. So I'm not sure if we have grounds for it or not. We'll talk to a lawyer, so let's see how things proceed. Update number 4. Hello. So it has been a few days since the incident in the morning. Following that, we spoke with a lawyer the same evening. My parents and Gerald were just trespassing and raising a commotion. They hadn't actually hurt anyone or anything, so they were let off with a warning for disorderly behavior and no charges were filed. But, fortunately for us, we still have grounds for a restraining order based on their behavior, so we chose to pursue it. Today, they received the notice. In a few days, we'll go to court and put an end to this, which will be a big relief. I've already spoken to several members of my family about this. I don't see the sense in disguising their behavior any longer, and it's genuinely startling that they're acting this way, especially given that they never cared much for the rest of the family previously. True, my parents were never particularly close to the rest of the family, and Gerald rarely speaks to anyone in the family. So having people cut them off shouldn't have had such a negative impact on them. I am guessing this isn't about the family cutting them off at all. This is simply about them trying to cause trouble for me. Well, I hope they're happy now because they've only screwed things up for themselves. Now they must face the repercussions of their deeds. It's incredibly terrible that so much turmoil could have been avoided if my parents and brother had simply behaved normally. But they had to go out of their way to embarrass themselves, and hence me. It's not like I like the procedure. It's actually quite unfortunate that I'll have to obtain a restraining order against my own family, but the circumstances demand for it, and I don't have any other option. This is honestly quite pathetic. Update number 5. Hey, it's been 4 weeks since my previous update. My family's 2-year restraining order was recently obtained, which is excellent. The rest of the family is in solidarity with us, as they have been since the beginning. But, as of now, they have not only blocked them out of their life and stopped inviting them to events, but they have also begun to communicate with me more frequently, ensuring that I am doing well and checking in on me. Even though I feel absolutely good most of the time, there are times when I feel really sad about what has happened to my family. I appreciate that the rest of the family is making up for it. I wouldn't trade having this kind of support system for anything in the world. I feel very connected to everyone, especially my cousins, because they have been at the forefront of everything, assisting me emotionally and practically, such as putting me in touch with an excellent lawyer. So, I'm extremely appreciative for everything everyone has done for me, and I believe it's time for me to start a new chapter. My wife and I are departing for our honeymoon in a few days, and I'm hoping that when we return, things will have changed. I know a change of environment is precisely what we need, therefore I am looking forward to the next week and a half. I'm going to ignore everything to do with my parents and Gerald. I am determined not to let them ruin this for me in the same way that they tried to wreck my wedding. Anyway, thank you to everyone who stayed up to date on what was going on with me and for all of the support in the comments. See you. After my dad's death, my mom remarried and sent me to live with Aunt. She and her husband planned to steal millions, but we exposed them. Okay, Reddit, this will be a lengthy one. 19F, need to get this down since all that has transpired has left my brain spinning. I never imagined I'd be discussing my life narrative here, but here goes. It all started when my father was diagnosed with cancer. I was 14, just entering high school, and I thought my biggest challenge would be mathematics or something. Dad had been tired for a long time, but we assumed it was simply work stress, you know. Then, one typical Tuesday after school, Mom sat me down in our kitchen and informed me that he had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The following 6 months were like watching a movie about someone else's life. Dad became seriously ill very quickly. He had lost all of his hair and so much weight that his favorite Chicago Bears shirt resembled a tent. He attempted to keep joking and assisted me with my arithmetic assignment even though he could barely sit up. When they took him to the hospital for the final time, he told me, "Don't let your mom's cooking kill you before I get back." That was just like Dad. He was always trying to make me laugh. He died on Thursday. I remember because it was supposed to be pizza night. We'd always order a deep dish on Thursdays. I'd been doing it since I was a child. Instead, I was sitting in a hospital waiting room, under those terrible flickering fluorescent lights, watching my mother scream into her phone while telling our relatives. I expected that to be the worst part of my life. Boy, was I mistaken? Mom completely lost it after Dad died. She resumed dating about 2 months later, claiming she needed to feel alive again or whatever. This is how she met Derek. Rich individual, real estate developer type. He began to visit Mom frequently, bringing her elegant gifts and taking her on weekend getaways. I tried to be happy for her. Dad would not want her to feel sad all the time, right? Then she married Derek. Less than a year after Dad's death. They didn't even tell me about their engagement. I discovered it when she asked me to try on a junior bridesmaid dress she had already purchased. The wedding was held at a luxury country club in Newport Beach. All of Derek's wealthy friends were present, staring at us as if we were some charity case Derek had adopted. I spent most of the reception hiding in the bathroom, trying not to cry. That's when things really shifted. Mom and Derek moved into his massive Newport Beach home, which included a pool and a tennis court. But, guess what? There was no room for me. Mom thought I'd be better at ease living with Dad's sister, Aunt Lisa in Chicago. Who benefits from greater comfort, Mom? So I was hauled off to Chicago like a parcel no one wanted. Aunt Lisa lives in a large mansion in Lincoln Park with Uncle Marcus and my cousins Michael, 17M, and Rebecca, 18F. We used to be quite close as children. Every summer, they'd come to visit, and we'd spend weeks making up ridiculous games and building blanket forts together. But man, everything changed after I moved in. I was no longer their happy summer cousin. Instead, I was an unwanted addition in their house. They began acting as if I was occupying their space, consuming their food, breathing their precious air, or something. Michael was always knocking over my belongings by accident. Rebecca would make these small comments about how her clothes were too lovely to lend me when I first arrived and didn't have any winter clothing. Aunt Lisa was the worst, however. She made it very plain that I was a burden. She even started charging me rent while I was still in high school. Who actually does that? The most messed up part? Mom just quit calling. Like, fully. She would occasionally send money, not enough to meet Aunt Lisa's rent, but that was all. I tried calling her, but she was always too busy with her new life. Yoga consumes too much of my time. Too busy attending charitable events. She was too preoccupied to talk to her own child. I'd see images on Facebook of her and Derek on vacation in Europe, attending lavish events, and enjoying a life separate from mine. She even stored all of our old family photos, including those with Dad and myself. She claimed they didn't match her new profile look. Like I was just some old furniture that didn't match her new decor. I started having dreams about being back in our old kitchen, where everything was regular. Then I'd wake up crying in this strange bedroom at Aunt Lisa's house, staring at gorgeous wallpaper that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, feeling as if I'd lost both parents rather than just one. After the first month at Aunt Lisa's, she raised my rent. For property taxes, or whatever. I'm 15, but okay. I guess I need a job. That's when my cousin Rebecca, who is always so helpful, tells me about this 24-hour laundromat that is recruiting in what she refers to as the dodgy section of Chicago. It's this dilapidated structure sandwiched between a closed-down doll store and a super suspicious phone repair company that I'm pretty sure never repairs phones. The owner, this old guy named Jerry, looks at me and says, "You're way too young to work the midnight shift." But when I assured him I could start that night and wouldn't complain about the salary, my age became less of an issue. So my life became this hectic schedule that still makes me anxious just thinking about it. Midnight until 6 a.m. At the laundromat, I had to deal with the strangest folks you can imagine. The worst aspect wasn't the strange customers, it was how frigid the place became. The heating hardly functioned, and Chicago winters are no joke. I'd wear about 3 hoodies simply to get through my shift. They didn't include that in the job description, right? However, one job was insufficient to meet Aunt Lisa's rent, let alone basic necessities such as food and school supplies. So I started working at a petrol station called Quick Stop at 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is where my wonderful cousins chose to make my life more enjoyable. See, Quick Stop was just next to their posh private school, where tuition was probably more than I earned in a single year. Michael and his friends felt it was great to come in during my shifts and completely wreck the place. They'd knock over the chip displays I had just organized. Spill their Slurpees, accidentally across the floor. Leave open packs of beef jerky around. Rebecca was worse, however. She was sneakier about it. She'd come in with her cheerleading buddies, and they'd talk about me like I wasn't even there. Oh my God, can you imagine having to work here? Like, I'd literally die? Look at her uniform. It's so polyester. Then they'd snap terrible photos of me attempting to clean up their messes and share them on social media. Things got awful at school as well. I was attending a local public high school, and Rebecca somehow made sure everyone knew about my occupations. People began leaving quarters on my desk for laundry. Someone put a name tag on my locker that read "Washer Girl." You're really imaginative, guys. Thanks. I was essentially sleeping through all of my lessons because, who can stay up when you're working from midnight to 6 a.m.? Trying to do schoolwork at 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Then we'll start working again at 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. My grades began to decline. Teachers constantly ask if everything is fine at home. I simply explained that I was adjusting to the change. The one positive aspect of the laundromat work was this homeless guy named Pete, who came in most nights. He wasn't like the other odd customers. He showed me how to fix the quarter machine when it became stuck. He showed me which customers were okay to let go when they were a quarter short. One night, Pete looked at me and said, "Kid, you're living life on expert mode right now." Made me giggle for the first time in weeks. Then he vanished when winter struck hard. I still worry about what happened to him. Uncle Marcus owned the building, although I had never seen him there. He delegated the whole responsibility to this property management company. Sometimes I'd see these luxury cars drive by quite slowly late at night. Later, I learned that he would send someone to check on the place. I guess he was watching me more than I realized. Meanwhile, Mom is sending strange texts such as, "Hope you're doing well." But she never answered when I called. Her Instagram feed was full with photos from yacht parties and charity galas. It must be lovely to have so much time for charity when your own child has to work 2 jobs just to get by. Aunt Lisa continually finds reasons to increase the rent. Utilities increased. HOA fees have increased. Your room is prime real estate. Okay, sure. I'm convinced that a converted storage area in the basement, with strange mushrooms growing in the corner, is good Chicago real estate. I began hiding cash in an old teddy bear that Dad had given me before his death. I had this great concept that after I had enough money, I'd be able to get my own house. But whenever I got near to a reasonable amount, something would come up. School fees. My old winter boots went apart. That time Michael accidentally backed into my car, and I had to pay for the repairs. But what's the ultimate straw? One day, I returned home after my gas station shift to find my room completely ripped apart. The bear had been ripped open. Stuffing is everywhere. And guess what? All of my savings? Gone. Rebecca claimed she was merely cleaning and had no idea about the money. Yes, right. That following week, Aunt Lisa comes down to my basement room and informs me that the rent is going up again. Not just a bit. We're talking double. He mentioned that property values in the area are increasing. I did the math and discovered that even with 2 incomes, I couldn't afford it anymore. But here's the thing. I had been attending classes at a nearby community college. Nothing extravagant, just the basics, trying to get ahead while still in high school. The counselor there indicated I may possibly acquire financial aid if I took more classes. That meant I needed to make a decision: keep paying Aunt Lisa's outrageous rent or try to obtain an education. So, I chose education. I had no clear plan. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed whatever could fit into my Toyota. The automobile had strange rust patches all over it, and the heat only worked if you kicked the dashboard in just the right place, but it was mine. The first night sleeping in the car was actually rather peaceful. We parked behind the laundromat. I used my work keys to sneak in and use the restroom. I had this whole setup. I reclined the driver's seat all the way back, used my work backpack as a pillow, and stacked like 5 blankets borrowed from the lost and found box. I thought to myself, this isn't too bad. Then winter struck. Real Chicago winter. The kind where your spit freezes before it reaches the ground. My car's battery began to die as a result of the cold, so I couldn't even run the heat. But what's the hardest part? It wasn't only the cold or the lack of sleep. It was attempting to appear normal at school. Try explaining to your chemistry teacher why your homework is wrinkled and smelling like laundry detergent. Or why do you keep wearing the same 3 outfits? The school counselor kept attempting to speak with me, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I live in my car, but don't worry, it's parked in a really nice alley. Then, my loving cousin Michael decided to play detective. I guess Dad became suspicious about why I wasn't around the house anymore. They followed me one night after my laundry shift. What about the next day? His TikTok had an entire video series called, My Homeless Cousin, a documentary. They recorded everything. My windows are frost-covered. I tried to study utilizing the light from the laundromat sign. I was caught changing clothes in the backseat once. The videos quickly became popular among their wealthy peers. People began blaring their horns and hurling things at my car as they drove past the laundromat at night. The cops also began to show up more frequently. Every few nights, there was a knock at my window. Can't sleep here, miss. So I would drive around until they departed, then return. I spent several evenings traveling in circles, watching my gas gauge drop and hoping I'd have enough to get to work the next day. But you know what's weird? I began noticing a black SUV parked across the street some nights. Always at a different location. But it's always there. Tinted windows. The engine is going. First thought? Cops are a creep? However, they never disturbed me. Just sitting there. As if they were watching. The temperature dipped to -5 degrees Fahrenheit one night. The kind of cold that irritates your eyes. My automobile would not start. The phone was dead. What about the laundromat? Closed for repair. I thought, well, this is it. This is how I die. They'll discover me frozen, just like the rodents in the alleyway. I wrapped myself in every article of clothing I owned and tried to think positive things. That's when I heard a knock on my window. I looked up. And there's Uncle Marcus, standing in the snow, as if it's perfectly natural to be out at 2 a.m. in Arctic temperatures. He just says, I think we need to talk. So how did it turn out? The black SUV was his. He had been watching me through the laundromat security cameras for weeks. Sending folks to check on me. He said he wanted to see what I was capable of. Who does this? What kind of messed up test is this? But really, at that point, I was too cold to care about his unusual teaching methods. So there I was, literally turning into a human popsicle in my car, and Uncle Marcus was just standing there in his fancy wool coat, staring at me through the window. I think he's going to lecture me or call the cops. Instead, he explains, My office has better heating. As if this is a completely regular circumstance. His workplace was a small space above the laundromat that I'd never been in before. Turns out, he had this entire private space up there. A desk. A miniature refrigerator, a coffee maker, even a small bathroom. While I'm defrosting my fingers around this cup of really wonderful coffee, he just sits there staring at me, as if he's trying to solve a mystery. Finally, he says, "You know, your dad and I used to sleep in a car too." What? I nearly dropped my coffee. See, I'd always thought of Uncle Marcus as this crazy rich real estate tycoon who wore suits that cost more than my car. But then he starts telling me a story I didn't know. Apparently, he and my father grew up extremely poor. Examples include, their mom worked 3 jobs and they still couldn't afford rent most months, akin to being impoverished. Uncle Marcus pulls out his phone and shows me an old photograph of 2 emaciated kids sitting in a vehicle, eating beans straight from the can. "That's your dad on the left," he says. And, yes, the same silly smile I recalled, but on a much younger face. I'm sitting there trying to digest the narrative as he tells it to me. How did they get from homeless teenagers to... Okay, how about this? This is when he informs me about the laundromat. The original owner used to let them hang out inside on particularly chilly evenings. They'd help him fix machinery, clean up, and do whatever else was necessary. When the owner became ill, he offered to sell them the place. Dad had recently begun college on a scholarship, but Uncle Marcus had been working construction and saving every dime. So the owner sold it to him for almost nothing. It was his first property. Then he begins taking out all these old documents from his desk. Property deeds, contracts, business plans, all with my father's notes in the margin. When your dad got sick, Uncle Marcus adds, he made me promise 2 things. First, I'll be on the lookout for you. Second, make sure you know how to look after yourself. Then he gives me this look and says, "Gotta say, you're doing better at the second part than I expected." I'm sitting there, trying not to cry, and failing miserably, to be honest, when he drops the big bombshell. It seems he now owns about half of the block around the laundromat. Apartment building, stores, even that dodgy phone repair shop, and he's been watching me through security cameras the entire time. He sent his goons in the SUV to keep an eye on me. "You work 2 jobs without complaining," he said. "Keep your grades up. Found ways to survive that most people wouldn't think of. Even kept that laundromat running better than the manager I hired." He truly smiled as he spoke that last part. "Jerry told me you fixed the quarter machine. Took my maintenance guy 3 tries to figure that out." That's when he takes out the key. He says it's for the apartment above his office. I had no idea this studio apartment existed. "It's yours," he says. "There will be no rent as long as I continue to work at the laundromat and maintain good grades." I wanted to decline. It felt too much like charity or something. But he shut it down quickly. "This isn't charity. This is an investment," he informed me. "You've got your father's brains and your own kind of determination. I'm investing in that." Then he shows me the entire file he's kept. Copies of my school records. Work reports from Jerry, even screenshots of those horrible TikTok Michael and Rebecca created. "They thought they were shaming you," he claims. "All I saw was someone who refused to break. It's strange, you know? All this time, I believed he was simply a cold rich guy who didn't care and allowed his wife to treat me badly. So how did it turn out? He was putting me to the test. Yes, it was a bad way to go about it, but I sort of grasp it now. He wanted to know if I had what my father had, that quality that keeps you going when everything is against you. Before I left his office that night, he mentioned something else concerning Dad. Told me about their last discussion when Dad was in the hospital. Dad made him pledge not to just give me everything, saying I needed to learn to be strong on my own first. But Uncle Marcus added, he also said to know when enough was enough. "And kid, you've more than proved yourself." That night, I slept in a proper bed for the first time in months. The apartment was basic, with only 1 room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. But it was warm. Clean. Safe. But what happened the morning after Uncle Marcus gave me the apartment? I awoke to find my phone flooded with texts from Aunt Lisa. It turned out that Michael had driven past the laundromat on his way to school and noticed me heading down from the upper flat. He took photos, of course he did. Aunt Lisa arrives at the laundromat during my shift. Wearing fancy gym clothing and looking like she's going to explode. Starts yelling about how I'm attempting to kidnap her spouse. How I've been seducing him, or something. Yeah, Aunt Lisa, I completely captivated him by being homeless and fixing washing machines. Super sexy? The customers were all gazing, and one old lady who comes in every Wednesday to wash her cat's bedding began filming the entire event on her phone. Aunt Lisa is saying all these insane things about how she always knew I was trouble, and how I'm exactly like my mother, taking advantage of wealthy men. I'm just standing there with a mop in my hand, wearing my filthy work uniform, thinking, is this really happening right now? Then Jerry emerges from the back room and tells Aunt Lisa she must leave before he calls the cops. She departs, but not before warning me, this isn't over. That night, I heard Lisa and Uncle Marcus having a tremendous fight upstairs in his office. Their words were muted, but I could hear Aunt Lisa yelling about that girl and how dare you. I felt embarrassed, as if I had ruined their marriage or something. Aunt Lisa later revealed that she had spent the night at a friend's place. When I saw Uncle Marcus the next morning, he had heavy circles under his eyes and gave me a lethargic nod. But the strange thing is that my mother suddenly called me for the first time in months, acting concerned. Honey, I am hearing some unsettling things, as if she had any reason to be frightened after abandoning me. I'm sure the rumors were provided to her by someone, most likely Rebecca. Then she and Derek show up at my flat unexpectedly. Mom is dressed in one of her latest luxury dresses, and her gaze sweeps around my small studio apartment. Oh honey, she begins, but the tone is more calculated than concerned. This is quaint. Derek waits near the door, as if he's worried poverty may spread. What are you doing here? I inquired without giving them a seat. There's nowhere to sit, unless they want to join me on my unmade bed. Mom starts pacing my small space. We've been hearing things about you and your Uncle Marcus. The way she says it makes my stomach churn. What about Uncle Marcus? Come on, honey, she attempts a sly smile. I know what you're doing, it's clever, really. I would have never thought of it at your age. What exactly did you think about? Getting close to Marcus in this way, working in his business and portraying the unfortunate abandoned niece. I'm sure he promised you a lot. The revelation struck me like a smack. Do you believe I am attempting to get his money? Well, don't you live here, work at that laundromat, and spend so much time with him? It is evident what you are doing. I laughed, but it came out rough. Who finds it obvious? Who is the woman who sent me to Chicago and then forgot about me? That is not fair. No, you know what is unfair? You disappeared when Dad died. You married Derek and then, 10 months later, sent me to Aunt Lisa as if I were old furniture that didn't match your new decor. I was grieving, she adds, but she is staring at her nice watch, not at me. You were upgrading, I shouted back. Trading up for a more glamorous life with your real estate husband and charity galas. And now what? You're concerned I'll acquire any of Uncle Marcus' money before you do? Derek takes a step forward, followed by all of the false authority. Listen up, young woman. Your mother and I are concerned about your welfare. What about my welfare? The laugh returns, this time uglier. Where was this concern when Aunt Lisa charged me $15 for rent? When was I working 2 jobs and sleeping in my car? Mom waved her hand dismissively. Don't be theatrical. Lisa would never review my hospital records from when I developed bronchitis while sleeping in that automobile. Check your pay stubs from the gas station and laundromat. Check out the rent receipts Lisa insisted me keep. Oh, wait, you can't. You were too busy uploading photographs from your yacht parties to take my calls. That's ancient history, Mom replies, but she's fidgeting with her wedding ring, Dad's wedding ring, which she enhanced with larger diamonds. We're here to help right now. Derek has a friend who operates a fantastic boarding school in Switzerland. Now you want to help? My voice raises. Or did you just find out Uncle Marcus is educating me about the business, and you're concerned I'll learn something and take a piece of what you think is yours? Mom's expression changes, then hardens. She abandons the concerned mother persona altogether. Marcus was your father's brother. Anything he owns should go to me, his wife. I am correct in calling her an ex-wife. Who remarried less than a year after his passing. I deserve, she begins, but I interrupt. What do you deserve? Dad contributed to the success of this business. He and Uncle Marcus started with nothing, but you are busy preparing charity galas with Derek. I'm learning how to repair washing machines, organize books, and genuinely assist people, just like Dad. Your father was a teacher, she spits out. He toyed with Marcus' business as if it were a pastime. Get out. I point at the door. Return to your ideal life with your wonderful hubby. Go organize another charity gala. Go archive some more family images because they don't suit your style. Simply go out of my apartment. Derek tries once more. Now, look here. No, you see here. I'm astonished at how steady my voice is now. I understand exactly why you're both here. When you heard I was working with Uncle Marcus, you became concerned that I may actually earn something you believe should be yours. But here's the thing, I am not you. I am not here for anyone's money. I am here because Uncle Marcus gave me a chance after you threw me away. Mom's face turns red. How dare you? How dare I? How can you come here and appear to be concerned about my well-being when all you care about is your financial account? I approach the door and open it. By the way, Mom, that pantsuit makes you appear desperate. They leave. Mom muttered something about ingratitude, and Derek is already on his phone. I shut the door and slide down against it, shaking. I can hear Mom's voice through the thin walls. I told you it would happen. That tiny gold digger is going to try and take everything. So after the whole drama with Mom and Derek showing up, things went strangely quiet for about a week. I was at work one night when Michael rushed into the laundromat. He appeared afraid. It turns out he was using Aunt Lisa's iPad. A note appeared from someone stored as D, simply saying, "Everything's ready for next week, Lisa baby, we're finally going to be free." Michael, being the nosy youngster that he is, read the messages. Aunt Lisa probably never logged out of her accounts on that iPad. Derek was the D you were looking for. As in my stepfather Derek. As in my mother's husband Derek. They had been texting for months. Michael discovered all of these emails, which detailed their plans to steal money from Uncle Marcus's business and flee together. They had been planning it for about a year. Every time Aunt Lisa hiked my rent, the money went directly into a hidden account. Michael showed up since he wasn't sure what to do. For the first time in his life, the youngster who had mocked me for being poor realized his mother was about to steal everything and abandon him. I called Uncle Marcus. To be honest, part of me wanted to let everything blow up after how they treated me. It would have been some good karma. Uncle Marcus came down to the laundromat right away. Michael was still shivering as he showed Uncle Marcus all of the messages. I have never seen Uncle Marcus appear so blank. His face simply shut down. He placed some calls. It turns out his lawyer had been suspicious of some business accounts for quite some time. The numbers didn't add up, but Aunt Lisa handled all of the paperwork. Uncle Marcus trusted her completely, so no one looked too closely. The lawyer reviewed every account and transaction. Know how much they intended to steal? $4.3 million. They had already transferred about $1 million to offshore accounts. Remember how Aunt Lisa used to moan about property taxes and utility bills? She was also stealing that money. But what about the real blow? Some of the money came from Michael and Rebecca's college savings. Their own mother was robbing their future so they could run away with my stepfather. Uncle Marcus had an entire team of lawyers and accountants come in. They discovered all of the false businesses Aunt Lisa had put up. She'd issue checks to these companies for maintenance or supplies, but the money would simply go into other secret accounts. Aunt Lisa remained very normal during the entire ordeal. She is still posting selfies from her workout on Instagram. She is still running her PTA meetings. Still pretending to be the perfect mother. Derek was the same. He took my mother to charity events, bought her costly gifts, and played the loyal spouse. The lawyers told us we needed to wait and gather more evidence before addressing them. But Rebecca also found everything on the iPad. She arrived at my flat one night, crying, with mascara all over her face, and asked if she could stay. For the first time in her life, she lacked a proper sleeping environment. It was strange having her there. This girl, who had mocked me for being homeless, was now almost destitute herself. She couldn't bear living in the same house with Aunt Lisa after learning everything. She slept on my tiny futon, used my cheap shampoo, dressed in Target clothing, and apologized repeatedly for how she treated me. But, honestly, seeing her realize that money does not make you a better person was enough. Uncle Marcus had his IT team monitor all accounts and transactions. The objective was to catch them shortly before they attempted to flee. But Aunt Lisa must have realized something was wrong because she began shifting money more quickly. Michael celebrated his 18th birthday the next morning. Aunt Lisa had arranged a great event at their house, including hiring a DJ, catering, and even setting up some mini golf in the backyard. She was particularly polite to everyone, most likely because she felt it was her last weekend there. Uncle Marcus determined it was the time to confront them, have all of the proof ready, and gather everyone in one location. Rebecca asked if we should alert my mother first, but Uncle Marcus answered no. We needed to observe her honest reaction to determine whether she was involved. The morning of Michael's birthday celebration seemed strange. Like, really odd. Aunt Lisa is racing around preparing centerpieces and inspecting the caterer while genuinely planning to leave with my stepfather the next day. Rebecca and I were helping set up, both aware that everything was about to blow but attempting to appear normal. Michael looked like he was about to throw up every time his mother touched him. Uncle Marcus had a great plan. His lawyer would show up suddenly at the party with some crucial paperwork. They'd gather everyone in the living room and then dispose of all the evidence. The FBI was really waiting nearby. Yes, actual FBI agents, because it appears that stealing millions from respectable businesses while trying to flee the nation is their thing. My mother arrived early, all thrilled about the party. She hadn't spoken to me since the whole Switzerland boarding school situation, but she pretended everything was fine. Derek entered behind her, holding a large wrapped package. Later, I discovered it was a high-end gaming system. I guess he was trying to purchase Michael's silence or something. The celebration began at 2 p.m. with all of Michael's wealthy classmates arriving in BMWs and Mercedes that their parents had purchased for them. The DJ is playing music, people are swimming in the pool, everything appears to be normal, but Rebecca, Michael and I are just watching Aunt Lisa and Derek, who are constantly checking their phones and whispering to each other. Around 4 p.m., the lawyer arrived. He's clutching a hefty folder and appears quite serious. Aunt Lisa's expression when she saw him, "I wish I had a photo." She knew. They assembled everybody in the living room. Some of Michael's friends tried to stay, but Uncle Marcus said, "Family only," in this voice, so they left quickly. My mother was fussing about interrupting the party, but then the lawyer began putting out documents on the coffee table. Bank statements, emails, transfer records, and images of Aunt Lisa and Derek taken by a private investigator. The room became quieter as he placed each piece of paper down. Then he played a clip of Aunt Lisa and Derek discussing their intentions, laughing at how foolish everyone was for not noticing. My mother stopped breathing when she heard Derek's voice. She just froze. Aunt Lisa tried to claim the recording was a forgery, but Uncle Marcus took out her iPad, the one Michael discovered the messages on, and began reading their texts aloud. "You guys," the shouting that followed. Mom flung herself at Derek and began pounding him with her pocketbook, which, by the way, contained 1,000,000 metal objects. Aunt Lisa attempted to flee, but the FBI agents were already on the scene. Some agent lady just says, "Lisa Anderson, you're being arrested for wire fraud and embezzlement." They brought both of them away in handcuffs. Aunt Lisa kept yelling about how we had ruined her life, but what was the worst part? Neither of them looked at their children. "So, your son's 18th birthday celebration has turned into a crime scene, and you can't even apologize." Mom had a complete meltdown, with full-blown hysteria. Derek had also been using her money. She had signed a series of papers without reading them because she trusted him, she claimed, and he had practically stolen everything she had left from her father's life insurance. The following few weeks were chaotic. The FBI inquiry uncovered even more evidence. Aunt Lisa and Derek had planned this for more than a year. They had phony passports, offshore money, and an entire secret existence ready to go. They had taken from almost everyone. The business, the kids' education funds, and even charity money from those fancy parties they were always attending. Uncle Marcus was watching how everyone handled the situation. Rebecca and Michael basically moved into my small apartment. We had this whole system. Michael slept on the futon, Rebecca shared my bed, and we all used the same bathroom, which was strange. They both landed jobs at the laundromat. Rebecca is actually very good with clients when she isn't nasty to them, while Michael has a talent for maintaining machines. He discovered an issue with the industrial dryer that even the repairmen couldn't remedy. Mom went to rehab, not for drugs, but to deal with everything. She'd been so intent on looking great and living the perfect rich life that she'd overlooked all of Derek's warning signs. Uncle Marcus really stepped up. He has been teaching us all about the business. He says he hopes we, me, Rebecca, and Michael, can run it together someday. We all have various strengths. I'm brilliant with mathematics, like my father was, Rebecca's amazing with people when she tries, and Michael's a bizarre genius with machines. Last week, we all went to Dad's grave for the first time together. Uncle Marcus told us more about himself, including how he helped establish this entire business while still teaching because he believed in helping people. Aunt Lisa and Derek are now in jail. It turns out that taking millions and planning to depart the country is criminal. They're both attempting to blame each other, which would be amusing if it weren't so tragic. Michael and Rebecca are still struggling with it. Imagine discovering that your mother cared more about running away with someone else's spouse than she did about you. But do you know what's weird? We are actually better now. Like all of us. Mom is dealing with her concerns rather than hiding behind fancy sunglasses. Rebecca and Michael experienced what it's like to genuinely work for something. I discovered that accepting help from others is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes I look around at my life and can't believe how different it is from a year before. For example, I am currently sitting in the laundry office, which is also my workplace. I handle the place, and it dawns on me. Despite losing my family, I am doing a lot better now. TLDR, discovered aunt and stepfather were secret lovers who planned to take millions and flee. They were arrested at a birthday party. Mom had a breakdown and went to treatment. Cousins learned humility through laundry, and we all became a true family. Also, Dad was playing 4D chess from beyond the grave. I bought a house, but my family expected me to house my sister's family for free. I refused, cut them off, and I'm moving to London. I, 35F, work as an investment analyst and am pretty successful in my job. Growing up with an older sister, Victoria, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, I realized early on that if I wanted something, I had to work for it myself. From the start, our parents' treatment of us was noticeably different. When Victoria turned 16, she received a nice new Volkswagen Beetle with a large red bow on top. When it was my turn, I got Dad's ancient Honda, which had 150,000 miles and a tendency to break down. Victoria has always been the ideal child in our parents' eyes. She was the beautiful one, the social butterfly, the one who couldn't do anything wrong. She married her husband, Nathan, 39 million, right after graduation, and they quickly began having children. They currently have 3. Charlotte, 8F, Lucas, 5M, and Andrew, 2M. They live in a rental flat, which Victoria frequently complains about. Meanwhile, I have been more fortunate in my own way. My best friend's parents own numerous properties and have been renting me a wonderful one-bedroom apartment at half of the market rate for the last 5 years. They trust me because I've never given them any reason not to. While Victoria had everything handed to her, I learned to be cautious with money. Since I began working, I've been saving diligently by living within my means, cooking at home rather than eating out, and taking public transportation whenever possible. My coworkers frequently mock me for being overly frugal, but I had a plan. College provided another striking evidence of inequity. Victoria attended her ideal school, with our parents covering all expenses, including tuition, lodging and board, and a hefty monthly allowance. Meanwhile, throughout my final year of high school, I applied for every scholarship I could find, staying up late to maintain my perfect GPA, knowing that it was my last chance at higher study. With remote work becoming more widespread at my company, I just need to come into the office for key meetings. A tranquil country cottage seemed ideal. Last week, I finally opened my savings account and examined the data. After years of diligent planning and saving, I had enough to make a down payment on a small home. I was in the middle of looking through real estate listings when my mother called, with her usual impeccable timing. "Don't forget, we're expecting you for dinner on Saturday," she added, her voice carrying a subtle order disguised as a reminder. "Victoria and Nathan are coming with the kids, and please try to be on time for once." I arrived at my parents' suburban home at precisely 5:05 p.m. that Saturday. Their driveway was already full with Victoria's minivan, so I had to park on the street. Inside, there was the usual chaos. Kids running around, my mother fussing over everyone as if it were a state supper rather than our typical family meeting. My father had already retired into his usual recliner with his newspaper, where he would remain until supper was served. The traditional dinner complaints circulated. Nathan complains about his demanding supervisor and difficult project deadlines. Victoria laments their tight flat and the children's constant demands. Dad expressed concerns about the economy and gas prices. Mom frequently adds to the commotion by commenting on everyone's eating habits and portion amounts. During these evenings, I mastered the art of mental escape. I took advantage of the hubbub by checking my phone under the table and scrolling through a lovely small home I had discovered. 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a stunning garden. The pricing was within my budget. The listing images depicted a beautiful wraparound porch, ideal for a set of rocking chairs. The prospect of sitting there with my morning coffee made me happy. "What's so interesting on that phone? You barely touched your food." Mom's piercing voice broke through the background commotion. Her hawk-like eyes never skipped a beat, despite the commotion. I could have made something up about work, but perhaps the warmth of the fantasy still lingering in my head compelled me to be honest. "Actually, I'm looking at houses. I'm thinking about buying one soon." The silence that followed was terrible. You could hear the ice cubes settling in the water cups. Even the children realized something had changed. Charlotte paused in the middle of a conversation about her school performance. Lucas halted, fork halfway to his mouth. Even tiny Andrew stopped slamming his spoon against his high chair. Victoria's head shot up so quickly that I worried she could suffer whiplash. Nathan's incessant rants about his boss ended in mid-sentence. Mom's hand paused in the middle of reaching for the salt shaker. Dad's newspaper descended gently, like a curtain, showing his astonished expression. "Buy a house?" Mom asked, as if she hadn't heard me right. "You?" "Well, yes," I admitted, immediately regretting my candor. The way they all looked at me made me feel like I had announced plans to invade Mars. I'm just looking at options right now. Nothing definite. What kind of house? Victoria said, her voice retaining the strangely pointed tone she used when she felt frightened. It was the same tone she used when I received a higher SAT score than she did, just before convincing our parents that I had cheated. I haven't really decided yet, I answered ambiguously, attempting to change the conversation. But I could sense their minds working, unspoken thoughts nearly palpable in the air. My parents exchanged profound looks, the type they'd honed over decades of marriage. Victoria kept looking at Nathan, who had suddenly become quite interested in his mashed potatoes. The typical supper bustle soon resumed, but something had changed. The talk felt forced, as if players had forgotten their lines and were desperately trying to finish the show. Even the children appeared to pick up on the stress, and their usual loud demeanor subsided. A week later, my phone began to vibrate with Mom's calls, during an important Zoom conference. After her third effort, I called back during my lunch break, expecting an emergency. Finally, Mom said, her voice practically trembling from joy. I found the perfect house for you. Martha from church informed her of a listing in her neighborhood. It's absolutely ideal. I set down my half-eaten lunch, immediately felt a headache forming. Mom, I haven't even asked for help finding a house. But she was now in full stride and unable to halt. It has 5 bedrooms. No, 6. The master bedroom is huge, and there are these adorable children's rooms with built-in closets. I blinked. Oh, and the backyard. There's already a playground installed, can you believe it? And the location is just perfect. Walking distance to St. Mary's Elementary School and the public library. I stroked my temples, trying to remain cool. Mom, I appreciate you thinking of me, but that's not what I'm looking for at all. I want a small country house, something cozy just for me. I don't need multiple children's rooms or a playground. Don't be ridiculous, she yelled, her delight quickly turning into frustration. You can't just think about yourself, you need to plan ahead. This house is perfect. Martha says the owners are motivated to sell quickly. After she hung up, Victoria began sending out an endless stream of postings for large family houses. Each subsequent message delivered another 4 to 6 bedroom house with numerous baths, large yards, and close proximity to schools and parks. By the 20th message, I had stopped checking. It was evident that they weren't listening to what I really wanted. Instead, I contacted Amanda Cha, a realtor with glowing recommendations. During our first encounter, I was struck by how well she listened. I want something small and cozy, I explained. A country house, not too far from the city, with good internet for remote work. Maybe a small garden where I could grow herbs and vegetables. When I told her about my pricing range, her eyes brightened up. I think I might have exactly what you're looking for. It just came on the market yesterday. The house she showed me was ideal, a lovely 2-bedroom cottage located 40 minutes from the city. White siding, dark green shutters. A wraparound porch with room for rocking chairs. Sunlight poured in via huge windows onto an open-plan living room. The kitchen was not large, but it had been redone with butcher block worktops and modern appliances. A wood-burning fireplace dominated the living room wall, and I could envision nice winter days spent reading beside it. Upstairs, there were 2 modest bedrooms and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, which I fell in love with right away. But the sunroom sealed the deal. There are windows on 3 sides that view a well-kept garden with raised beds and a small greenhouse. I could immediately envision myself spending weekends there, surrounded by greenery and natural light. The owner offered a quick closing discount, and I accepted without hesitation. The following few weeks were a blur of paperwork and preparation. I put down a larger down payment than was required, keeping the monthly payments manageable, using the money I had carefully saved all these years. While my family undoubtedly believed I was being cheap, I was actually building my future. After everything was finalized, I planned to announce the news at the next family dinner. Mom had just started discussing another house. Barbara next door is selling. She'll give us, you, a good price. Actually, I interrupted, unable to suppress my joy, despite their past attempts to sway my decision. I've already bought a house. The hush was absolute. Even Charlotte, who is normally unstoppable, paused in mid-motion. I took a big breath and began detailing my new house, my voice full of enthusiasm despite the mounting tension around the table. It's this beautiful cottage, about 40 minutes outside the city. 2 bedrooms, the most amazing sunroom, and there's even a small greenhouse in the backyard. The previous owner had these gorgeous raised garden beds. My father's fist hit the table with such power that the water glasses jumped. Are you out of your mind? He exclaimed. I had never seen him that angry before. Andrew burst into tears as he heard the startling boom. How dare you buy a house without consulting us first? My mother's cheeks had turned an alarming red. After all those perfect family homes we found? Why would I need to consult you about buying my own house with my own money? I inquired, feeling as if I had wandered into some strange parallel dimension. Because we had it all planned out. Mom practically screamed. Barbara's house would have been perfect, right here in the neighborhood, plenty of room for everyone. Room for everyone? I asked slowly, growing confused. It's just going to be me living there. The hush that ensued was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged glances as Victoria sat there with an unusually serene demeanor. Nathan was suddenly quite interested in his plate. Actually, Mom explained in a tone that made my blood run cold. The plan was for Victoria, Nathan, and the kids to live there with you. I waited for the punchline. It didn't arrive. Victoria nodded, as if everything was totally normal. We're so cramped in that apartment. Your house would give us all the space we need, and since we wouldn't have to pay rent or utilities, we could finally start saving money. I gazed about at their dead serious expressions. Dad's severe condemnation, Mom's righteous rage, Victoria's entitled expectation, Nathan's awkward avoidance. Years of memories flowed back. Every time, Victoria got what she wanted while I worked twice as hard for half the pay. Every time, my successes were ignored while her slightest achievements were praised. You all just assumed I would buy a house for Victoria's family to live in? Well, of course, Mom threw out her hands, as if I was being intentionally cryptic. That's what family does. This isn't helping. This is expecting me to house 5 people without even asking me. You're being selfish, Victoria shouted, her cool demeanor breaking. The kids have to share rooms? Andrew's crib is in our bedroom. It's not fair to them. You need to cancel this ridiculous purchase immediately, Mom commanded, her voice harsh with the control she had exercised over me for 35 years. Barbara's house is perfect, right in the neighborhood. No. I stood up, scraping my chair against the floor. The word came out stronger than I expected, bearing the weight of decades of pent-up rage. Chaos erupted. Mom jumped up and waved her arms. Dad's voice roared. The children started crying. But we'll be so cramped, Victoria moaned, like if I hadn't said anything. Charlotte has ballet. Lucas has soccer. You're not going to be cramped anywhere because you're not living in my house, I said calmly. None of you are. Ever. Is that clear enough for you? They stared at me as if I had a second head. The entitled shock on their faces was nearly amusing. How can you be so cruel to your own sister? Mom asked, clutching her pearls and her voice shaking with wrath. I grabbed my handbag and walked towards the door, their shouts rising behind me in a cacophony of demands and accusations. I couldn't hear another word. I got in my car and drove home in a haze, their entitled expectations still echoing in my ears. Update 1. The aggressive knocking on my flat door began as I was packing the kitchen. The coffee mug I was wrapped in newspaper slid from my grasp but landed safely on a mound of packing paper. Open this door right now, my father's voice rang through the wood. We know you're in there. I froze, bubble wrap still in my fingers. More thumping ensued. Go away, I yelled back. I'm not discussing this anymore. Don't you dare talk to us like that. Dad's fist caused the door to rattle in its frame. We raised you better than this? My hands trembled as I took up the phone. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police, I mean it. I pulled up the keypad and purposefully pushed digits, ensuring that they could hear the beeping. I'm dialing right now. Dad's curse was broken by Mom's sudden intake of air. We're leaving. Mom's voice had become as icy as ice. But this isn't over. You're making a terrible mistake. I slid down against the wall, my heart thumping, after hearing their footsteps disappear down the corridor. An hour later, Victoria sent the first message, which included a photo of Charlotte and Lucas squished together on their shared bunk bed. Look how little space they have, the caption stated. Charlotte can't even have a desk for homework. When I didn't answer, another photo appeared. Andrew's crib squeezed into the corner of Victoria and Nathan's room. He wakes up every time we come to bed. This isn't fair to him. As I continued to ignore her, Victoria's communications became increasingly hostile. They began arriving at all hours. 2 a.m., 4 a.m., and 6 a.m. You always were Dad's least favorite. Mom cries herself to sleep because of you. I hope you're happy all alone in that big house while your nieces and nephews suffer. I blocked her phone number. Then her Facebook. Then her Instagram. But she kept finding new ways to contact me, setting up new accounts, using Nathan's phone, and even inventing false email addresses. The phone calls began to come from different directions. First, there was Aunt Marie. Sweetie, I just heard what's happening with your sister. Surely, You can find it in your heart to help family. Uncle Bob was next. Kid, you need to think about what really matters here. Family comes first. Susan is my mother's dearest friend. Your mother is devastated. How could you do this to your own family? Even my former high school teacher, Mrs. Peterson, whom my mother still saw at church. I always thought you were such a kind student. I'm so disappointed to hear about this situation with your sister. They all sent the same message. I was selfish, heartless, cruel. I should give up my home, my goals, and my independence to help Victoria. None of them seemed to wonder why Victoria's living predicament was my concern. After 2 weeks of incessant pestering, I'd had it. I went to my cell carrier and changed my phone number, giving it solely to my employer and a few trustworthy pals who had not chosen sides in this fiasco. Moving day was blissfully quiet. I chose a moving firm I'd never used before, ensuring that my relatives couldn't track my address using common local services. The movers worked quickly and professionally, and by dusk, I was standing in my new living room, surrounded by boxes and possibilities. That first night at my cottage, I sat on my veranda with a cup of tea, listening to the crickets and watching the stars appear. There's no traffic noise, no sirens. There's no family turmoil. Just peace. I felt something inside me suddenly relax. A tightness I hadn't realized I'd been lugging around for years. I occasionally checked their social media updates. Victoria posts passive-aggressive status messages about family betrayal and selfish siblings. Mom's barely veiled posts about ungrateful children and family obligations. Relatives and family friends made comments, everyone taking sides without understanding the whole tale. But here's the thing. None of it concerns me anymore. Their comments can't reach me in my new refuge. I turned the second bedroom into a home office, positioning my monitors to face the window so I can watch birds visit the feeder I erected. The previous owner's raised garden beds are currently overflowing with herbs and vegetables. My first try at gardening was surprisingly successful. For the first time in my life, I am living fully on my own terms. And it feels really liberated. Update 2. Something unexpected occurred today. Remember the large investment project I've been working on remotely from my new home? It paid out hugely. My manager summoned me to a virtual meeting to inform me that I had not only received a significant bonus, but was also being considered for a director job. My new environment's quiet and focus had enabled me to excel at work in ways I had never believed possible. Without regular family interruptions and emotional exhaustion, I found myself proposing new ideas and taking on leadership roles naturally. This triumph, however, resulted in an interesting development. Victoria's apartment complex was sold to a developer who intends to transform it into luxury condominiums. All tenants received eviction notifications with a 60-day notice to vacate. I learned from family members that Victoria and Nathan were having difficulty finding a new place that fit their budget. The timing could not have been better. My promotion comes with a large salary boost, and I chose to utilize my bonus to make down payment on a lovely holiday home in the mountains. It's essentially an investment, as property values in that neighborhood have skyrocketed. Today, I received a well-phrased email from Nathan, not Victoria, interestingly enough. He described their predicament and asked if I would like to negotiate housing arrangements again. The old me may have felt guilty. Despite everything, I could have considered helping. But I simply gave them some local apartment listings that fit their budget and wished them luck in their quest. Mom took a different approach. She showed up in my workplace building. I suppose she got the address from LinkedIn. With tears in her eyes, she described how she and her father were suffering with their retirement money and had always relied on the family sticking together to help each other in their golden years. I listened politely. Then I stated that my financial advisor had advised against combining family and financial commitments. Her face turned a familiar shade of red. But this time, in the professional setting of my company lobby, she couldn't cause a fuss. The family's social media campaign has taken a unique turn. They are now writing about wealthy people who have lost touch with their roots, as well as stories on toxic individualism in modern society. My aunt even wrote a lengthy Facebook post about how money can transform people, to which hundreds of people responded sympathetically. But they are unaware that my accomplishment has drawn the attention of headhunters. Several famous firms, including one in Europe, have expressed interest in hiring me. The idea of putting an ocean between myself and this drama is getting more enticing. Meanwhile, my new greenhouse is flourishing. I've started growing exotic orchids, which are delicate and require time and attention to detail, similar to creating a job or limits. I'm discovering that the most satisfying experiences in life require time and effort to cultivate. I joined a local gardening group, which has become a fantastic source of camaraderie. These people have no idea about my family issues. They just know me as the woman who brings homegrown herbs to meetings and asks in-depth questions about soil pH. It's refreshing to be judged entirely on who I am, rather than my willingness to give up my life for the sake of others' convenience. Yesterday, I held my first dinner party in my new house. Colleagues, gardening friends, and neighbors gathered at my dining table to share wonderful food and conversation. No one asked anything from me, except possibly the recipe for my herb-crusted salmon. The evening was filled with laughter, intelligent conversation, and mutual respect, all of the things that family gatherings should be but never are. As I watched my visitors have fun on the porch and fireflies dance in the yard beyond, I realized something important. I haven't simply purchased a house. I've built a life. A life that is totally my own, free of the burden of others' expectations and entitlements. Allow them to submit their passive-aggressive messages. Let them discuss family duty and obligation. I'm too busy thriving to worry. Update 3. The last elements of my win fell into place today. Victoria and Nathan were unable to acquire a new apartment. Their credit check found some alarming findings. They're currently temporarily residing with our parents, with all 3 kids squeezed into the guest room. Meanwhile, I received an official offer for the director post in our London office. The remuneration package is outstanding, including a lovely, company-provided flat in Kensington. When I announced my acceptance on LinkedIn, professional congrats flooded in. The contrast between my colleagues' sincere support and my family's harsh silence was startling. The most rewarding moment was when Dad called. His voice lacked the usual authority. He began by casually asking about this London foolishness, but it soon became evident why he was calling. The recent market slump has significantly reduced their retirement savings. They'd reportedly planned to sell their home and move in with Victoria's family, in the house they anticipated me to buy. We always assumed we'd all be together, he added, his voice unusually shaky. Your mother and I aren't getting any younger. I stayed professional and detached, offering a great financial advisor I know. She specializes in retirement planning for seniors. I'll email you her contact information. My family is unaware that I have already made arrangements to manage my mountain home as a premium vacation rental. The predicted income is impressive, more than enough to pay Victoria's whole monthly rent, strangely. But it is not information I intend to convey. Today, I held a farewell garden party for my local friends. The greenhouse was in full flower, with orchids providing a beautiful backdrop. As I watched my visitors have fun, someone commented on how much I've changed since moving here, how I appear more confident and at ease. Later that evening, while packing for London, I discovered an old photo album. There was a photo of teenage Victoria receiving her brand new Volkswagen, and I was standing in the background next to Dad's ancient Honda. The recollection no longer stings. Instead, it makes me realize how far I've come. I am retaining my rustic cottage. It will be my getaway when I visit the United States. The garden will be maintained by a nice retired couple from my gardening group, while the house will remain my sanctuary, free of family strife. Tomorrow I'll board a flight to London. My family does not yet know. They will find out when they see my social media posts from Hyde Park or along the Thames. Victoria will probably write about sisters who desert their families. Mom will share articles on expats who regret abandoning their loved ones. But sitting here in my sunroom one final time before my early morning journey, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant colors, I feel nothing but peace. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning the battle, but choosing to leave the battlefield entirely. Allow them to deal with their cramped living conditions and financial challenges. I'll be too busy enjoying my new life in London to read their social media updates. Sometimes the best retaliation is simply living well.